I've spent 14 years working as a ranger in the Monongah National Forest, and in that time, I've rescued disoriented hikers from treacherous ravines, guided bewildered hunters through blinding snowstorms, and stumbled upon more lifeless bodies than I'd ever want to remember. Yet the events of September 1976 continue to jolt me awake, drenched in sweat even after all these years. I figured I'd encountered every harsh surprise the West Virginia mountains had in store. Turns out, I couldn't have been more mistaken. It was a Tuesday morning, the air sharp and invigorating in that classic late September way. The foliage was beginning its autumn shift, brushing the hilltops with hues of amber and scarlet. I was sipping coffee at the ranger station when Sheriff Martinez stepped inside, his expression as somber as a midwinter dawn. __0__. I was familiar with the spot. Isolated, about 18 miles from the closest road, but manageable for those who knew their way around. The Brennans had the proper permits and appeared seasoned enough based on their records. Quote 1, I inquired, grabbing my backpack without hesitation. Quote 2, I'd handled searches like this countless times before. More often than not, they wrapped up with sheepish campers who'd simply misjudged the hours, or an individual nursing a sprained foot near their setup. The Appalachians didn't pull punches, but they weren't full of enigmas. Bears, storms, or simple mistakes could explain it all. The trip to the trailhead wound through an hour of twisting mountain paths, with Martinez trailing in his cruiser. We didn't exchange much. Silence hung between us. We'd collaborated on operations like this for 8 years, and he was the steady sort, never one to overreact without cause. The family's blue Ford was parked solo on the loose gravel lot. I verified the plate against my paperwork. It checked out. Doesn't look like any fight happened near the car. Appears undisturbed. Keys are right there in the ignition, Martinez observed, glancing inside from the driver's side. We shouldered our equipment and headed along the path. It was a straightforward route, clearly signposted, winding into a secluded valley at the foot of the peaks, a prime spot for families seeking a peaceful escape from the world. Around 2 miles in, a faint scent of campfire smoke reached us. Their site was tucked in a modest open area by a stream, with 2 blue tents pitched solidly, ropes taut and pegs firm. The fire pit contained cooled embers and partial logs, while a pot rested on the grill, its contents boiled off long ago. ___, quote _5, ___, I shouted, my words bouncing off the nearby slopes before fading into nothing. Silence replied. Martinez circled the edges as I inspected the setup. It was all in order, tidy and methodical. Sleeping bags remained unrolled within the tents, provisions safely sealed in bear-proof containers. Nothing suggested haste or alarm. But then an irregularity caught my eye. 4 distinct sets of footprints trailed off from the site, each veering in separate directions rather than as a group, which you'd anticipate from a family outing. They looked like solo wanderings, as if everyone had drifted away independently. That's odd, Martinez remarked once I showed him. What would make them go off on their own? I pursued the most prominent path, likely the dad's, from the heavy boot impressions. It ascended toward a rugged cliff line, but roughly 50 yards along, I paused to crouch and examine closer. The prints appeared reversed, dragged heel first back toward the camp. The toes pointed homeward, yet the heel marks dug in deeper. Tracks like those were entirely new to me. A shiver unrelated to the crisp breeze crept over my skin. Born and bred in these hills, third generation no less, I'd heard my grandfather spin yarns about the hollow men, ghosts of Civil War fugitives who sought refuge in caverns and perished from guilt and hunger. Just tall tales and ridge runner myths, he'd chuckle, dismissing them lightly. But crouched amid that deserted glade, staring at 4 trails of baffling steps vanishing into the underbrush, those childhood warnings resurfaced with a sharp, unwelcome vividness. My radio buzzed at my hip. I attempted to contact base, but only crackles came through. Typical in these sunken vales, where the peaks wreaked havoc on transmissions. Quote 8, quote I suggested to Martinez. Quote 9, quote. We picked the deepest set and began the ascent. Late afternoon light filtered through the canopy, stretching eerie shadows over the woodland. You would have expected bird calls or rustling squirrels overhead, but the woods lay hushed, utterly still. Those boot marks guided us up a rugged incline blanketed in shifting slate and thick laurel bushes. I'd hunted down my share of missing hikers in the past, but these tracks unsettle me deeply. They sank too far into the soil, as if the person had been hauling some massive load. Martinez kept glancing at his watch. It's getting dark, Jake. We need to radio for help. The radio's still out, I replied, even though I'd tested it repeatedly. The interference seemed to be building, actually. At times, I swore I caught faint voices hidden in the hiss, but when I strained to listen, it was just emptiness. The path bent sharply around a huge rock, and that's when we spotted him. Tom Brennan was sunk into the loose dirt up to his torso, his hands scrabbling desperately at the surface. His nails were shredded and caked with blood. His gaze fixed rigidly forward without a blink. Martinez muttered, lunging ahead. I caught his sleeve. Tom's torso showed no rise or fall, no vapor in the chilly air, yet his eyes shifted, tracking us as we edged around him. Let's get him out, Martinez urged, sinking to the ground. The soil loosened without resistance, far too readily, as though freshly churned. We hauled Tom loose, and he sucked in a ragged, trembling inhale, his initial breath in God knows how long. The ground, he rasped. It dragged me under. Susan. Where's Susan? I examined him quickly. Nothing broken beyond the mangled nails and grime embedded in his flesh, but his skin felt unnaturally icy, like he'd lain buried for ages. How much time passed down there, Tom? His gaze flicked nervously from Martinez to me. Martinez steadied Tom on his legs as I scanned the spot. The dirt encircling the pit felt powdery, unsettled, but below that, I spied something bizarre. Timber supports, weathered and decayed. Quote 17, quote I noted. Quote 18, quote, Tom seized my wrist with unexpected force. Quote 19, quote, a shiver unrelated to the crisp air crawled over me. My wife, Sarah, had succumbed to cancer 2 years back. The sorrow lingered in my gut like lead. We headed toward base camp, Tom slumping against Martinez. The light faded, tinting the woods in fiery hues. I watched the surroundings closely, but it all appeared ordinary, perhaps overly so. Then the sobs began. They echoed from ahead, veering from the path. A young girl's wail, shrill and terrified. One of the Brennan's children. Tom shouted. The weeping intensified, turning frantic. We pushed through the brush, chasing the noise. Yet whenever we neared, it shifted, always slipping away. The foliage parted, leading to an unfamiliar glade. Odd, since I'd roamed these trails for more than 10 years. At its heart loomed a solitary ancient oak. Dangling from a low limb was Susan Brennan, hoisted roughly 8 feet up, bound by what resembled, I blinked to confirm, cord woven from slick, coiled guts, her legs twitching feebly. "Oh, God," Martinez breathed, lifting his gun. But my focus locked on Susan's expression. Her eyes were wide and conscious, locked on us. Her lips parted as if forming words. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 23, underscore, underscore, Tom yelled. But I restrained him. Susan had been gone at least a day. I could judge by her pallor, the limp sag of her form. Yet she stirred, still attempting speech. Martinez hissed. I had no reply before the kids' pleas resumed. This time they emanated straight from underfoot. "Daddy, save us! We're below!" Tom dropped, raking the soil. "They're right here. I hear them." The ground under the oak yielded softly, freshly worked. As he scraped away, another detail struck me. The chill had plunged a good 20 degrees in moments. My exhales now fogged visibly. Martinez's radio sputtered alive. Amid the crackle, a familiar tone emerged. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 28, underscore, underscore. I recognized it instantly. Sarah, my late wife. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 29, underscore, underscore. I murmured, gripping the device. Quote 30. Tom clawed wildly now, flinging soil aside. Quote 31. The dirt collapsed, exposing a narrow void sized for crawling. Icy wind surged forth, laced with moist soil and decay. From its depths, the children's summons rang out anew, but their tone had twisted, ravenous. "Join us, Daddy. Return to us." The radio hissed to life once more, Sarah's words cutting through sharper than before. "Jake, please don't abandon me. I've waited forever." I glanced up at Susan dangling from the branch above. Her mouth shaped the same urgent word repeatedly. "Run." That's when they appeared. Ghostly forms gliding amid the trees along the clearing's border. They mimicked human outlines, yet felt distorted, overly lanky and elongated. Their heads lacked any defining traits, just empty voids. "Martinez," I murmured softly. "Time to get out of here." But as I spun around, he'd vanished. Only Tom was left, partially swallowed by the pit he'd excavated, drawn by his kids' pleas into the blackness. I seized his ankles and yanked him away from the brink. He resisted fiercely, nails scraping the rim. "Release me. They're waiting. I hear them sobbing." "That's not your children," I told him, even as doubt gnawed at me. "Tom, face me. When was the last time you actually saw Katie and Michael breathing?" His gaze locked onto mine briefly. "Just yesterday at dawn, flipping pancakes by the campfire." Katie scorched hers and burst into tears. Then his brow furrowed. The rest, it's a blur. Those spectral figures were drawing nearer, slipping through the woods without a whisper. No crunch of boots, no stir in the underbrush, only an eerie, soundless advance. We need to locate Martinez, I urged, steadying Tom on his feet. Martinez who? I gaped at him. The sheriff. He stood right beside us moments ago. Tom's expression went vacant. Out here, it's only us two, Jake, ever since you unearthed me. A chill gripped my chest like iron. I recalled Martinez supporting Tom's steps. Recalled him lifting his gun at the sight of Susan. But now, Jake. Sarah's tone floated from the radio anew. How could you desert me in that ward? I was terrified. With trembling fingers, I killed the switch, yet her pleas persisted, softer, emerging from the very trench Tom had carved. I screamed for you, over and over, but you never returned. Regret slammed into me like a hammer. She had every reason. On her final day, with the physician's warning it could drag on for hours, I'd slipped away to clean up and swap outfits. I couldn't bear witnessing her slip further. She passed without me there. Quote 36, quote I breathed. Tom peered beyond me, eyes bulging. Quote 37, quote I whirled. A figure waited at the meadow's fringe, clad in the azure scrubs Sarah wore in death. Her complexion ashen, strands limp and grimy, yet unmistakably her, frozen in my final memory. You abandoned me. Her words resounded oddly against the peaks. I lingered for you. You're an illusion, I countered, my tone fracturing. Sense my reality. She advanced, and the chill deepened sharply. Ice crystals bloomed on the ground near her soles. Sensed the isolation of dying forsaken. The ashen silhouettes had stepped fully into view. I made out their details now. They'd been mortals once, twisted by some force. Flesh pallid and ashen, garments shredded and caked in soil. Features hollowed, orbits recessed into bone. Relics of Civil War attire, I noted, frayed and timeless. Beyond question. Deserters, Tom muttered. My ancestors' tales spoke of them. Troops who fled the clash at Rich Mountain, burrowing into these hollows. Shame and famine claimed them, yet their essences lingered. The apparition resembling Sarah extended a limb toward me. Quote 38. Quote I retreated, hauling Tom along. Quote 39. Quote 40. Quote Tom explained. His speech sharpened, mind clearing. They seek out the burdened with regret, luring them to enlist. That's what befell my kin. Susan carried the weight of her long shifts, absent from Katie's recitals. I carried mine, the booze, the rages on returning home. One of those wan entities rasped, tone like brittle branches in gusts. Descend to the shadows, no remorse below, no lingering sorrow. The excavation Tom had made widened independently. Timber braces appeared, outlining a forgotten passage. Additional murmurs rose from the depths. Young voices, mature ones, all summoning kin to follow. How can we resist? I demanded. Tom shrugged. Resistance isn't the way. Embrace or flee. But they dominate the depths, and these ridges hold no secrets from them as they do the quick. The Sarah facsimile loomed mere paces distant. Examined closely, flaws emerged. Her flesh gleamed unnaturally slick, pupils abyssal pools. Terror consumed me, she murmured. The disease tore at me, and you failed me at the end. I understand, I admitted. My apologies. I ought to have remained. Then remain eternally. Her fingers brushed mine. In that instant, visions surged through me. Sarah's final vigil, invoking me. Attendants soothing her in vain. The service I scarcely joined, drowned in liquor. the ensuing haze of whiskey and self-reproach, yet brighter flashes, too, Sarah's joy at our vows. The expression on her face as she shared the news of her pregnancy, right before the devastating miscarriage that plunged her into depression, leaving her open to the cancer's grip. Fond recollections intertwined with painful ones. Quote _45, __. Tom murmured softly. Quote _46, __. The entity masquerading as my wife bared its fangs in a vicious growl, its teeth unnaturally pointed. Abandonment renders love irrelevant. I never left her, I countered, and this time my words rang true. Youth and fear led me astray, and I erred gravely. Yet my devotion to her endured every single day of her life. The impostor recoiled, its shape wavering like a faulty broadcast. Nearby, the ghostly figures edged nearer, encircling us. But in that moment, their true nature sharpened into focus. They weren't beasts of terror. They were souls devoured by remorse and disgrace, locked in perpetual torment of their own devising. The passageway, Tom explained. It links to every cavern in these parts. That's their lair for snaring victims. That's where they've hidden my kin. A fresh noise reverberated from the opening. Shots fired, followed by a familiar shout. Jake! It was me calling out. I'd located them deeper in. Martinez. He persisted somewhere amid the labyrinth below. We need to descend, Tom urged. No alternative exists. The Sarah imposter had regained its solid form, obstructing the route back to the path. The surrounding entities tightened their ring. Our sole escape lay downward, into the abyss where ravenous murmurs lurked. Stick by me, I warned Tom. And no matter the echoes or visions that arise below, know they're illusions. Yet as the words left my lips, doubt gnawed at my conviction. The shaft proved vaster than its surface appearance, hewn from raw stone and braced with decayed beams. Our flashlights uncovered gouges along the surfaces, as if desperate hands had scraped for freedom. Quote _50, I shouted. The call distorted as it bounced away, warping into something alien the further it went. Down here, the response came, now barely audible. Make haste. Tom trailed me tightly as we ventured lower. The chill intensified with every footfall, and distant drips of water pierced the gloom. Other noises mingled in, though, hushed murmurs, muffled sobs, and beneath them, a steady scrape like claws against timber. This feels off, Tom grumbled. These passages predate the Civil War by centuries, delving far too profoundly. The corridor broadened into a vast room. Our beams illuminated a nightmarish tableau. Scores of individuals slumped against the walls, frozen in place. I knew several from faded posters of the vanished, trekkers, sportsmen, overnighters lost to time. They breathed still, yet something was amiss. Their flesh bore that same glossy sheen as the apparitions we'd faced, their stares vacant voids. As our light swept over them, they swiveled toward us, faces etched with uniform craving. Welcome back, they intoned together, their tones weaving a eerie chorus. At the chamber's distant edge, Martinez knelt by two tiny forms, Katie and Michael Brennan. The kids stirred faintly, but like their mom, death clung to them unmistakably. Their complexions were ashen, outfits caked in grave soil. Martinez rose, relief flooding his voice. I trained my beam on him steadily as we drew near. Quote 54, quote, I probed. Quote 55, quote, a chill surged through me. Martinez had vanished prior to my hearing Sarah's voice over the airwaves. He couldn't possibly know. What's my spouse's name? I inquired in a low tone. The figure in Martinez's guise grinned, revealing blackened dentition. Why does it count, Jake? I've come to unite you with your loved ones. Tom seized my sleeve. That's not him. It never was. They mimic any soul. The counterfeit Martinez chuckled, the resonance clashing against the space unnaturally. Perceptive fellow. But the hours passed. Your comrades lingered here for ages. In a shadowed nook, almost concealed, the authentic Martinez huddled against the stone, gaze unfocused. A trickle of saliva trailed from his lips' edge. Quote 56, quote, I pressed. Quote 57, quote, the entity replied. Quote 58, quote, I examined the seated forms, encircling the room more intently. They weren't gone. They were adrift, ensnared within their psyches by remorse's crushing load. So that's your method, I grasped. No outright slaying. You forge captives from their inner torments. The imposter Martinez inclined its head. Far more gratifying than mere demise. We thrive on culpability, Jake. And you? A banquet awaits. The murmurs swelled in volume, and I discerned they all echoed as one. My inner voice cataloging each blunder, every cutting remark flung at Sarah amid her sickness. Each instance I'd prioritize duty over her side. The evening I fled the ward, unable to witness her fade. Quote 59, quote, the entity coaxed. Quote 60, quote, it hissed. Guilt slammed into me like a tidal surge. All my regrets, every selfish act, every shortcoming as a partner. The voices swelled, blending into the symphony of my inner loathing. Tom's grip on my shoulder yanked me to reality. Jake, eyes on me. What's the gravest error you committed? I left her by herself, I murmured. She passed alone, because I was too spineless. And what drove you away? The reply clawed its way out, tougher than I'd imagined. Because I couldn't fix her anymore, because seeing her agony was destroying me as well. That's not egoism, Tom countered. That's just humanity. Nearby, the entities edged nearer. The imposter Martinez loomed higher, its features distorting in bizarre ways. Human frailty, human defeat. Join us back home, Jake. No suffering up there. But Tom had nailed it. After 2 years, I finally pierced the veil of remorse. Sure, I'd screwed up. Sure, I'd let Sarah down at times. Yet I'd cherished her too. Tended to her, clasped her hand amid the chemo, operations, and those endless shadowy months of decline. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 66 underscore underscore. I declared, my tone firmer. Quote 67. The Martinez mimic bared its teeth in a growl. Quote 68, quote 69, I cut in. Quote 70. The entity's outline shimmered, turning a see-through. Tom, I asked, what haunts you? I boozed hard, stormed in furious, forced Susan and the little ones to tiptoe around my moods. Are you some beast? No, he admitted deliberately. I was in pain, and I botched the coping. But I cared for them deeply. The cavern trembled. The wall-bound figures roused, their lids fluttering like they'd snapped from deep slumbers. The entity's shapes destabilized, rippling like desert illusions from scorching air. You reject everyday human flaws, I realized, insight rushing in. You crave unblemished remorse, total disgrace. But we're not fiends. We're ordinary folks who err. The false Martinez emitted a screech akin to gale whipping shattered panes. You fit with us down here in shadow. No, I replied. My place is out there bearing sorrow, shame, and affection intertwined. That's the essence of life. The thing pounced, yet its grasp sailed harmlessly through me like icy vapor. Throughout the space, the ensnared souls rose, bewilderment fading from their gazes. The kids, Tom pressed, tense. What of Katie and Michael? The tiny shapes against the distant wall pivoted our way. But I knew they weren't the Brennans' offspring, just additional deceivers donning known visages. Where are the real ones? I pressed. The sham Martinez gestured to a slim tunnel at the chamber's rear. It sneered, fading further. Yet I surged ahead into the tunnel, Tom and the liberated captives trailing. We pressed on. The lower route opened into a vast, natural hollow, broader than any man-made space. Time-worn markings etched the surfaces, not from the Civil War, far ancient, perhaps indigenous, or predating even that. There sat Katie and Michael Brennan on the stone ground, undeniably breathing, yet gazing vacantly at the rock faces. Amid them perched three silhouettes in decayed Civil War garb, the founding runaways, igniters of this horror. They lifted their heads as we approached, their countenances hollowed, yet unmistakably mortal. __quote _88 _ I commanded. The middle one, clad in shredded sergeant's remnants, denied with a wag. They arrived of their own accord. The father bore shame over his liquor. The young ones heard their lost mother's summons. Their mom's alive, Tom snapped. Not anymore. We required her voice to lure them. We ended her for the trap. The revelation struck like a hammer's strike. That corpse swaying from the branch was no phantasm. It was Susan herself, slain to ensnare her kin. Tom bellowed in fury and sorrow, lunging forward, but his fists met only nothingness. Like before. Quote 92, quote, the sergeant mocked. Quote 93, quote. I dropped to my knees near Katie and Michael. Their stares met mine without focus. I protested. Another fugitive rasped. The sergeant's gaze ignited. We grant solace. No lingering disgrace. No enduring rue. Just the silent blackness. I glanced back at the kids once more. Katie's mouth formed words without sound. And I barely caught the repeated whisper. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. A thought started to take shape. You thrive on remorse, I told them. But what if a person lets go of their own blame? The entities stirred restlessly. I faced Tom. Your girl, Katie? What do you notice when you gaze at her? She's only a young child. She never sparked any arguments. Susan and I were struggling way before she came along. Say that to her. Tom dropped to his knees next to his daughter. Katie, sweetheart, are you listening? You haven't done a single thing bad. Daddy's issues aren't because of you. Katie's eyes fluttered open, and for the first moment since we discovered her, she truly met his gaze. Daddy. The deserters let out a collective hiss, their shapes growing fainter. Michael, I addressed the boy. Fearing the shadows doesn't mean you're frail. It shows you're cautious. That dread protects you. What in the world went on below? Gas escape? Equipment failure? Perhaps we ought to report this. Bring in the state police divers. What happened to the others? Do you catch that melody? Only the cascade. Martinez! Come look at this. Martinez! Halt! The river summons us. It beckons us into the ring. William Ashford, we've awaited your arrival. Her English was flawless, delivered in the very timbre of my mother's. My hold slipped, and I plummeted 20 feet onto the jagged ledge below. Pain exploded in my left shoulder with a sickening crack, yet I staggered upright and pressed on. For those entities atop the rim were already descending in pursuit. That's how I stumbled upon the cavern. It lurked concealed by a veil of spray from a narrow side stream, narrow enough for a single body. I wedged through the cascade and found it burrowed roughly 30 feet into the hillside. Ancient Cherokee glyphs adorned the surfaces, patterns I'd glimpsed in exhibits at the heritage site. At the rear lay a mound of remains, human skeletons meticulously sorted. Femurs grouped in one spot, humerus in another, crania aligned like forgotten tomes in some grim archive. Certain fragments bore the patina of centuries, jaundiced and brittle. Others appeared recent, flecked with lingering flesh. Etched above this ossuary into the stone was an inscription in plain English. The stream exacts a toll for passage. Each era, it claims 8 souls. The Cherokee met this levy across 2 centuries. Upon their exile, the obligation shifted to our kin. Nourish the flow, or it seizes its due. In a separate script beneath, 1962, Boy Scout Troop 414, believed we'd evade its grasp. Further down, 1976, Wilson Family Reunion, Our Error. Then, 1982 Marshall University Rafting Club. Regrets. The most recent mark from the day prior matched Jake Morrison's script. They had foreseen it. By some means they'd grasped the peril awaiting, yet ventured forth regardless. Beyond the shelter's mouth, splashes resounded. They'd tracked me down. I endured the night amid those relics of failed fugitives from this cursed domain. At intervals, murmurs drifted in, invoking my name. My former spouse, Linda, urging my return. My lads pleading for aid. My mom crooning the cradle tune from my fevered childhoods. Yet I recognized the deception. All were gone. Linda resided in Pittsburgh these days. The boys pursued studies in Ohio colleges. Mother had rested in her plot half a decade past. The waterway mimicked their cadences to lure me forth. As morning's glow seeped into the hollow, I examined the Cherokee icons with fresh scrutiny. I'd encountered akin designs at the center, but these predated them, more primal. They narrated via imagery, a vast waterway stained crimson, crowds compelled to ford under armed threats, males, females, young ones perishing in the frigid torrent, and beyond, apparitions emerging from the depths to yank the quick below. The Cherokee Trail of Tears had traversed this very ravine in 1838. Multitudes uprooted from their lands, driven westward under rifle barrels. Upon hitting the Blackwater River, swelled by seasonal floods, the troops denied any delay for calmer tides. More than 300 Cherokee perished in the attempt. Non-swimmers bearing offspring astride, females encumbered by sodden garb and seasonal layers, frail ancients weakened by the trek. Per the etchings, their essences lingered. Decades apart, every 20 years, the river exacted 8 offerings to atone for that collective tragedy. 8 to swell the drowned throng, to intone the dirges of demise, to entice the unwary into the abyss. Should the tribute go unpaid by choice, the wraiths would harvest forcibly. They mimicked cherished tones to draw the living near. They twisted paths into endless coils. They'd reverse the stream's rush to climb slopes if compelled. The Blackwater hoarded compound on a ledger inked with slaughter. Yet the cavern's glyphs revealed more, a potential escape. The Cherokee depictions outlined a ceremony, offerings of tobacco to the spirits of the waters, invocations recited in their ancient tongue, an acknowledgement of the grave injustice inflicted in this very spot. My grandfather was part Cherokee, and as a kid he'd shared a handful of those sacred phrases with me until my folks insisted he quit stuffing my mind with what they called nonsense. Even now, fragments of those prayers lingered in my memory. Rifling through my coat, I located a pack of smokes, backup stash for bartering with hunters who occasionally wandered off course. I ground the tobacco in my hand and edged toward the cave's mouth on hands and knees. They were all there, expectant, the entire group. Those 7 young students mired up to their waists in the stream. Martinez beside them, his gaze milky white, grin a void of shadow. The spectral Cherokee, clad in sodden garments from another era, encircled the rest in a broader ring. At the heart of it all, 2 voids remained, reserved for myself and another. "Return home, William," Martinez summoned, his tone cascading like a torrent. "The river aches in solitude." Emerging from the cavern, I felt the rush seize my ankles at once, dragging me into the formation, yet I raised my offering aloft. "To the guardians of these waters I present this token," I intoned. Dredging up the scant Cherokee I retained. "I seek pardon for the harm inflicted upon your kin." The tug ceased abruptly. The apparitions of the Cherokee exchanged glances, murmuring in their sharp, resonant dialect. An elder female in a drenched gown advanced. "You grasp the ancient phrases," she observed in English, "yet phrases devoid of true insight ring hollow. Then guide me to that insight." With a sweep of her arm, she indicated the ring of the submerged. "We bind them in place, just as your kind bound us, through successive lineages, atoning for decisions not our own. The obligation swells with every reckoning. What is it you seek? Acknowledgement, verity, the tale recounted with accuracy, her pallid stare locked on to mine, and a vow to honor our sacred ford." My mind turned to the outfitters ferrying crowds of outsiders along these reaches. The crowds who romped through the currents as if it were mere amusement, oblivious to the tragedies etched into these depths. "I swear it," I replied. "I'll ensure the truth reaches them." The elder inclined her head. She conferred with her companions in Cherokee, and gradually they dissolved like fog at dawn. The college youths slumped beneath the surface, granted peace at last. Martinez dropped to the bank, collapsing as his sight cleared to its usual hue. The eerie chant fell silent. The flow resumed its natural path toward the sea. Yet as the elder faded from view, she pivoted once more. "The obligation endures," she warned, "merely postponed. 8 souls every 2 decades until the injustice is rectified. 2002. Keep it in mind." Then she vanished, leaving me solitary amid 7 corpses and a shell-shocked deputy whose recollections ended at the moment he entered the flow. We filed the report as a sudden deluge. 7 undergrads carried beyond Blackwater Falls in a freak swell. A lone survivor discovered farther along with severe chill and amnesia. Gear malfunction postponed the search. Heartbreaking, yet typical for Class 5 runs in peak runoff periods. Loved ones gathered for a remembrance ceremony. The school launched a fund in their names. The town paper published a cautionary piece on the perils of turbulent rivers. No one probed why the remains showed no signs of tumbling 60 feet down the cascade. No inquiries about their uniform serenity or those glazed stares. No curiosity over the pair who simply evaporated. Each month, I began depositing tobacco at the fall's footing. Modest tributes, halting pleas in my fractured Cherokee. The elder never materialized again. Still, at times the haze seemed to observe me. Occasionally the current would soften to a gentle warmth as I drew near, a subtle gesture of recognition. I dove into the past as well. Devoted off-duty hours poring over state records, scanning Army dispatches from the Cherokee expulsion. Uncovered the commander's log of the Blackwater Passage, unfortunate fatalities from the harsh cold, roughly 300 dead or more. Directives to press on, weather be damned, 300 souls. That's the tally in every official ledger. But the whispered Cherokee legacies, handed through survivor lines who evaded the forced trek, painted a starker picture. 543 lost to the Blackwater Falls. Warriors, mothers, little ones, the aged. At 8 taken every 20 years, that's 40 across 100. Spanning 2 centuries from that catastrophe. A mere 80 claimed. The balance remained vastly unsettled. I compiled the Vanishings. 1962, Scout Patrol, 8 boys unaccounted for. 1976, Kin Gathering, 8 relatives submerged. 1982, Campus Outing on Rafts, 7 verified fatalities, 2 absent. 1987, Angler's Crew, 8 fellows vanished. 1992, Parish Young Ones Outing, 8 youths deemed lost to the depths. 1997, Advanced River Venture, 8 pros and visitors gone. The rhythm traced to 1842, 4 years post-expulsion. Precisely every 20 years without fail. 8 would plunge into the river and emerge forever altered, or not at all. On occasion, their forms turned up posed in rings. Other times, they simply melted away. Yet the hunger persisted relentlessly, striking invariably at the Blackwater Falls crossing. Those 2-decade intervals between gatherings allowed folks to let it slip their minds. Fresh rangers arrived, new authorities took charge, and families relocated to the region. Tales were tucked aside as mere mishaps or sorrows. The cycle remained concealed. However, by 2002, I felt prepared. I'd submitted my early retirement request back in 2001, then mentored my successor, a fresh-faced ranger called Sarah Collins, hailing from Colorado, utterly unfamiliar with the ancient river legends. I skipped sharing the Cherokee woman's cautionary words. I omitted why I routinely placed tobacco near the falls. I stayed silent on those occasional misty dawns when ethereal songs rose from the depths. I reasoned that my absence during the fateful moment might cause the toll to bypass this round. Perhaps the entities would hold off for the proper individual or situation. I was mistaken. Precisely on November 15th, 2002, 2 decades since I'd fished those 7 corpses from the river, Sarah Collins rang me up at my house. "Bill, I could use your assistance. We've lost 8 folks from a Morgantown hunting group at Blackwater Falls. Their cars remain parked at the trailhead, yet there's no trace of them by the water. Did you inspect beneath the falls? Here's the issue. The water's crystal clear right now. I can peer straight to the depths. No one's there. You vowed the tale would spread, yet the passages endure. Visitors persist in turning our burial ground into recreation. I attempted it. I offered tributes. I delved into the past. Insufficient. They arrived intoxicated, firing wildly at shadows, profaning the spot where innocents perished. __, quote _129 __, this is William Ashford, former park ranger. I'm reporting several killings at Blackwater Falls State Park. Culprits are the ghosts of Cherokee souls compelled to ford here in 1838. Casualties: 8 hunters drawn under at precisely 3 a.m. today as recompense for a crimson obligation accruing for more than 160 years. They dismissed me as unhinged until they discovered the 8 hunters positioned in an impeccable circle under the falls, each with milky eyes and ceaseless streams of water spilling from their lips. The account exploded across national headlines. Today, a memorial stands at the falls, a bronze marker recounting the authentic Cherokee fording history. Rangers now lead sessions on honoring holy grounds. Tour operators must deliver background on the site's legacy before guiding visitors to the stream. Still, every 20 years, as if timed by gears, 8 souls descend into the river. Certain obligations defy settlement with mere leaves and noble aims. Some demand sacrifice. And the Blackwater River remembers with unyielding endurance. I'm Marcus Flintridge, and for 13 years, I've served as a park ranger at Hawk Nest State Park in West Virginia, where ancient peaks guard buried mysteries. Folks often imagine ranger life as aiding wayward trekkers and highlighting picturesque spots. Truth is, my duties delve into shadows far grimmer. I focus on industrial relics, cataloging the excavation catastrophes that etched wounds across these ridges. The alert hit on a muggy Tuesday in August, the air so dense it clung like syrup. I was in my office revising records on forsaken shafts when the radio buzzed alive. "Marcus, trouble brewing at the old Hawk Nest passages?" came Sarah's voice from dispatch, laced with that strained urgency signaling crisis. I placed my mug aside, bracing for the worst. Those Hawk Nest passages had been barricaded for half a century, and not without cause. "What sort of trouble?" "City adventurers. A group of 6 university students pried into the blocked mine network last evening. One dialed emergency services near midnight, claiming his buddies were stuck. Then the connection cut out. My gut twisted. Those passages weren't merely hazardous, they were fatal. In the 1930s, Union Carbide bored a 3-mile bore through Hawk's Nest Mountain to reroute the fresh waterway for a hydroelectric setup. They recruited mostly destitute laborers, black and white alike, scraping by in the Great Depression. What the firm concealed was the rock's composition: unadulterated silica. A staggering 764 workers succumbed to silicosis after inhaling that deadly rock dust. Their lungs calcified into stone even as they drew breath. The corporation hushed it all up, bribing physicians and interring the facts alongside the corpses. It's regarded as one of the nation's most horrific workplace catastrophes. That's the reason these peaks feel like a second skin to me. For years, I've been piecing together the events in this region, talking to relatives, gathering proof that many would prefer to leave buried. I've ventured into 43 forsaken shafts and compiled accounts of calamities reaching back over 100 years. I can distinguish a collapse from shoddy construction versus one triggered by an altogether different force. Though I don't subscribe to notions of the otherworldly. Phantoms aren't behind landslides. Entities don't inundate excavations. The deceased don't claw from their tombs to pull the quick under. Or so I convinced myself while stowing supplies in the vehicle. The trip to the passage's gateway lasted 20 minutes along twisting highland paths. Foliage crowded the edges, foliage already wilting under the summer scorch. Arriving at the outdated entry, I spotted the anomaly right away. The cement barrier, sealing the passage for half a century, had been shattered. Not sliced or exploded, just fractured from within. Like some force had smashed through 3 feet of fortified slab with raw strength. Debris fragments were strewn amid the undergrowth, certain bits hurled 30 feet from the breach. I snatched my tools. The gas monitor, a powerful beam light, spare air supply, medical pack and camera. Once inside the depths, the two-way wouldn't function. Mobile signals vanished underground too. Trouble meant handling it solo. The passage's maw gaped pitch black and void. My detector buzzed at once, raised silica particles suspended, impossible in an airtight vein. I donned the breathing apparatus and activated the helmet light. "Marcus to base," I transmitted. "Entering now. No word in 3 hours. Summon help." "Roger." "Stay safe below." I crossed the threshold, and the ridge engulfed me completely. The corridor exceeded my anticipations. 12 feet tall, 15 feet across, hewn from unyielding stone. My steps reverberated oddly, as though an unseen presence muffled them. The light's ray felt dimmer, struggling against the dense atmosphere. After 50 yards, evidence of the vanished group appeared. A premium trekker's pack, ditched against the side. It bore a thin coating of pale powder mimicking silica, yet inconceivable after so many sealed years. No errant grit ought to linger. I snapped images and pushed onward. The chill deepened inexplicably for midsummer. Surface temps hit 95 degrees, but here, vapor trailed my exhales. Another 100 yards revealed a chill-inducing discovery. Recent tread marks etched in the ground. Vanishing further in. Yet all charts indicated this route terminated at a barrier after a half-mile. These tracks veered into uncharted territory. I trailed them inward, the meter ticking as particulates rose. 13 years in hazard assessment had honed my gut, now howling for retreat. Still, with 6 lost souls and my intimate knowledge of the labyrinth, I pressed on. The primary vein forked into uncharted side routes, some raw karst formations, others seemingly chiseled by hand. The impressions diverged, pairs heading separate ways. I selected the broadest path and delved further. Then came the initial unnatural noise, a far-off clang of steel against mineral, evoking a miner's swing. It reverberated across the network, sourcing from all directions simultaneously. I halted, straining until it dissolved into quiet. "Hello?" I shouted. "Anybody in here?" Park Ranger Marcus Flintridge here. If you're hearing this, track my call. Who's there? I shouted. The steps halted, replaced by ragged breaths, wheezy and strained, as if from ravaged airways fighting for every gulp. It emanated from the very corridor I'd exited. I'm with the Park Service. _quote_141__. If you're hurt, I'll guide you out. This ain't no place for the living. It rasped, voice like rubble scraping underfoot. It's reserved for us who perished. The rest of them, where? One with us already. You'll join soon enough. The haze deepened, my inhales turning to gasps. Silica coated my palate despite the barrier. Fire scorched my ribs with every draw. Abruptly, they melted back into the rock and dissolved. The powder drifted down, the atmosphere purifying. My device quieted, readings normalizing. I stood solitary amid the corpse and the fuel-less blaze. In that instant, the awful reality hit. These shafts weren't mere relics. They were graves, and the souls interred within seethed with unrest, craving retribution for their torment. I ought to have retreated immediately. Sense dictated it. Yet abandoning the remaining 5 to a similar end? Unthinkable. So I ventured further, tracing routes that defied the mountain's bounds. The corridors warped before me, once linear paths now arced unpredictably. Crude surfaces gleamed polished and slick, and that infernal dust accumulated relentlessly, even as my instruments insisted the breeze was pristine. In the subsequent hollow, I discovered 2 additional remains. A youthful female and an elderly male, apparently university adventurers judging by their outfits, lay clustered side by side near a barrier, limbs entwined as though shielding one another from an unseen threat. Similar to the initial casualty, both had succumbed to acute silicosis, their pulmonary tissues turning to crystal in mere moments rather than decades. Yet the arrangement felt off. The corpses were oriented toward one specific surface, suggesting they'd been fixated on it in their final instance. Tracing their line of sight, I spotted etchings gouged into the stone with bare human nails. They knew, the message declared. The company knew we would die. Underneath, in another script, 764 dead, no justice. And at the base, still damp and seemingly inscribed in blood, make them pay. As I snapped images of the surface, the clanging of the pickaxe resumed, now perilously close from directly at my back. Whirling about, I confronted them head-on for the initial time. Scores of hazy, dust-veiled forms wielded ghostly implements against the passageway barriers. Clad as miners from the 1930s, their visages were sunken voids swirling with silica particles. But their efforts weren't haphazard assaults on the stone. They were broadening the corridors, excavating fresh roots plunging further into the peak, forging a labyrinthine snare for intruders. We're constructing something, a site where the facts can no longer be interred. Union Carbide was aware the stone was nearly pure silica. They knew it would end us. Yet they demanded the passage completed swiftly and affordably, dispatching us inside sans adequate respirators, sans alerts about the lethal vapors we inhaled. The firm claimed you received dust alerts. They insisted equipment was supplied. They handed us kerchiefs, mere fabric scraps for our faces, as we bored through quartz that was 99% pure silica. They knew it would fell us in months, not years. But why persist in the job? We were destitute. Underscore, quote, underscore 157, underscore, men of color and pale-skinned alike, frantic for income amid the Great Depression. They compensated us 50 cents daily to perish gradually, and once blood filled our coughs, they dismissed us, recruiting replacements. The atmosphere grew dense once more, my breathing apparatus laboring against the mounting particulates. Yet I pressed on with questions. I needed to grasp their intent. Quote, 158, quote, I ventured, quote, 159, quote, 160, quote. The lead form replied, quote, 161, quote, 162, quote, 163, quote. The hammering intensified, growing insistent. The spectral workers accelerated, inflating the network at a preposterous pace. Bedrock liquefied beneath their strikes, spawning extensions that outstripped the mine's former bounds. Why this expansion? I demanded. The firm concealed it all. The form replied before resuming its task. They bribed physicians to attribute our deaths to lung fever. They interred us sans examinations. They incinerated health files and coerced our kin to hush. That occurred 90 years past. All culprits have long perished. The tool halted in mid-arc. Every shrouded entity in the corridor swiveled to regard me with their vacant, eddying stares. The firm endures, they chorused, tones thundering like a landslide. Revenues persist, the reality remains suppressed, and fresh laborers perish in novel shafts, inhaling modern toxins. The enclosure quaked, fissures splitting the barriers. Beyond the splits, additional corridors and vaults extended into the mountain's unfathomed depths, farther than any excavation had delved. Quote 170, quote, the pioneer form urged. Quote 171, quote. The haze thickened to the point where my fingers vanished in the murk. My filter jammed at an unnatural speed. I lurched toward a presumed outlet, guided by faint echoes ahead. Trailing me, the particulate shades recommenced their toil, sculpting additional vaults for further revelations, erecting a testament to corporate slaughter that burrowed to the mountain's core. And further on, two souls teetered on the brink. The innermost vault sprawled enormously, surpassing any volume conceivable within a massif. My flashlight's glow vanished into the blackness above, while the walls receded into invisibility on all sides. Yet the space wasn't vacant. It brimmed with relics from the 1930s, drills, compressors, pulverizers, all humming away without a hint of power. They operated in a steady pulse, like lungs expanding and contracting, grinding non-existent stone into ghostly powder that hung in the air like solid fog you could wade through. Operating them were countless shapes made of dust, the 764 laborers who'd perished during the tunnel's construction. They toiled with the unyielding efficiency of veterans who'd clocked in for 9 decades, endlessly boring, exploding, and smashing in their perpetual routine. At the heart of the room, I spotted the final pair of lost adventurers. They were hanging on, but just. A couple of young folks, likely pursuing advanced degrees, were curled up on an elevated ledge that spared them the densest haze. Respirators masked their faces, though I noticed the filters had turned filthy and blocked. Quote 172. The woman gasped at the sight of me. Quote 173. The man chimed in, his words dulled by the gear. Quote 174. I scaled the platform to join them, inspecting my gear. My own mask was almost sealed shut, and the backup oxygen tank was dwindling fast. Quote 175, quote, I asked. Quote 176, quote, she replied. Quote 177, quote. Down below. The dusty forms halted their labors and tilted their heads toward us. One, topped with what resembled a supervisor's helmet, advanced and uttered, "You're seeing the reality now. What it meant to labor in these depths. Each inhale slicing your insides like blades. Each shift edging you toward choking on your solidified blood." "We get it," I told him. "What befell you was horrific, but these two had no hand in it. They're mere scholars. All who venture into these passages must grasp it," the shape countered. "Must endure our suffering, must weigh greed against lives, as the corporation once did." That's when the pieces fell into place. This wasn't blind, ghostly wrath. It was an ordeal, a teaching, a call for reckoning that had simmered for 90 years. "What exactly do you seek?" I demanded. "Reveal the full account," he answered. "Unvarnished. Not the polished tale in textbooks. The identities of those who perished, the leaders who suspected and stayed silent, the physicians who doctored reports. I've dedicated years to that," I confessed. "Reports compiled, kin consulted, archives scoured for every scrap. But you've kept it locked away, never shared it widely." He spoke true. Stacks of proof languished in my workspace. Witness accounts, health files, internal notes exposing how Union Carbide foresaw the deadly toll on its crew. Yet whenever I pushed to release my findings, legal hounds arrived with warnings and court orders. The firm retained its clout, its safeguards. "They'd drag me to ruin with lawsuits," I admitted. "Ruin my livelihood. Ensure the facts stay interred." "Precisely our plight," the figure noted. "We perished for their gains, and they entombed our narrative with our remains." The haze thickened further, and I watched the students falter, gasping as their masks gave out, like mine. We had mere moments before the silica ravaged our lungs irreparably. "If I vow to expose it all," I proposed, "will you release us?" "Vows come cheap," he retorted. "They're simple to utter. We require evidence of resolve." The cavern trembled then, more devices thundering into motion. The billows intensified, silica seeping past my weakening seal, scorching my throat with every draw. My ribs ached fiercely, the onset of the miner's torment already upon me. Quote, 196, quote, 197 he commanded, quote, 198, quote. In that instant I saw the miner's daily dilemma clearly: ingest the toxin for wages, or reject it and doom your loved ones to want. No escape, just shades of demise. I yanked free my respirator. The initial gulp seared like fire. The atmosphere, laden with silica, was akin to inhaling damp cement. I bent forward, hacking violently, the tang of blood and pulverized grit on my tongue. Every pull was torment, yet I compelled myself onward. The spectral workers observed in quiet vigil as I underwent their routine ordeal. The gradual asphyxiation, the solidification within my chest, the certainty that each respiration hastened the end. Yet I persisted, unbroken. After what seemed an eternity, though likely just moments, the haze in the air started to thin out. The rumble of the equipment died away. As the particles drifted down, a more compact, everyday space came into view, hewn from regular stone. The shadowy forms had vanished, yet their murmurs lingered off the stone surfaces. You've seen it now. You've grasped it. Share our tale. I assisted the pair of students to stand. Their breathing masks had lasted better than my own, yet both displayed initial symptoms of silica inhalation. We required urgent care. As we staggered toward the tunnel's mouth, I resolved on a path that would shape my future. I'd release it all, the files, the accounts, the proofs I'd gathered. I'd battle the legal battles, the intimidations, the efforts to muzzle me, since I'd inhaled the atmosphere of the departed. And I recognized the essence of fairness at last. Half a year on, I found myself in a Charleston, West Virginia courtroom while a federal judge delivered the ruling in the negligence suit brought by relatives of the 764 Hawks Nest Tunnel laborers. My investigation supplied the key details that shattered the cover-up after 9 decades of denial by the corporation. The students and I escaped those passages that day, but we all endured a week in the hospital recovering from severe silica poisoning. The physicians marveled at our endurance. Based on their estimates, the dust levels we'd encountered ought to have ended us swiftly. I kept quiet about drawing unmasked breaths in the innermost room. Certain realities defy clinical documentation, though I disclosed the rest fully. My work, at last in print amid warnings and litigation, exposed the extent of the Hawks Nest tragedy. Union Carbide had realized early on that the project would claim lives. Concealed company records, stashed away for generations, indicated leaders figuring it cost less to cover fatalities than to supply adequate protection. The trial hit headlines nationwide. Kinfolk gained reparations for forebears who perished broke and overlooked. A monument rose at the site, engraving the 764 names suppressed with the facts. The passages got sealed forever behind 6-foot-thick concrete walls. Officials designated the zone a historic landmark and limited entry to avoid repeats. Even so, in the dead of night, I catch emergency radio dispatches, pleas from the blocked depths seeking aid. Whirs of devices where none should operate. Swirls of grit on sunny afternoons, forming shapes reminiscent of people. I always investigate those signals but discover nothing. The barriers stay solid. The depths lie vacant and still. Still, I hold the reality. Certain wrongs resonate across generations, forging their unique eternity. The Hawks Nest crew achieved redress, but their fury etched an enduring mark in that ridge. A warning that business offenses yield repercussions reaching past profit sheets and top-tier payouts that fueled them. Just days ago, word came of fresh mining woes. This in Kentucky, a firm skimping on safeguards for bigger gains. Laborers succumbing to avoidable respiratory ills. Relatives informed their kin passed from routine ailments. I'm heading south at dawn with stacks of data and a mind stocked with costly insights on concealing facts. For those depths taught me a lesson beyond any patrol skills. The departed won't settle till fairness prevails, and at times, the quick must inhale toxins to truly comprehend equity. The Hawk's Nest passages are locked away, but the narrative they hold has emerged. In executive suites nationwide, leaders are realizing certain confidences weigh too much to remain interred indefinitely. The grit inevitably resurfaces. I'm Jonathan Stormage, a Blue Ridge Parkway patrolman for 2 decades. In those years, I've rescued over 300 souls from these peaks. A few breathing, a few beyond. I know each path, each drop, each front that sweeps North Carolina's uplands. Or so I believed. Folks often inquire about the Stormage moniker. My father bestowed it, claimed it signified I was destined to decipher skies. Oddly, he nailed it. I logged 8 years in the Air Force tracking weather before returning to these heights. I interpret fronts like others scan headlines. I sense an approaching gale 3 days ahead, simply from the breeze on my flesh. That March dawn in 1973 unfolded routinely. Forecasts predicted sunshine, but my instincts disagreed. High-elevation winds behave uniquely up here, as if driven by their own will. Folks from the Cherokee tribe always claimed these ridges housed the spirits of the wind. Back then, I brushed off such tales as nonsense. After all, wind's just physics, pushing along gradients of pressure and heat, nothing more. I was out inspecting the gauges close to that famed mile-high swinging bridge when the alert crackled over the radio. A film team out of Charlotte had vanished. They'd hiked up for a segment on the fierce 80-miles-per-hour gales battering the area. Their final check-in happened right in the middle of the on-air report that morning. Contact cut off sharp at 9:30, with reports of gear failing amid a freak surge in the breeze. Dispatch broke through the interference to fill me in. The last signal mentioned some technical glitch as the gusts hit hard and fast. I'd watched plenty of out-of-towners misjudge the moods of high-country storms. Perched at 5,264 feet on the bare granite of Grandfather Mountain's peak, the bridge offers zero shelter. Up there, the blasts barrel through unchecked, capable of toppling a sturdy guy or hurling him off the side if he's careless. Losing an entire broadcast squad, though, that raised alarms like nothing else. Heading up the trail, the first oddity that hit me was their vehicle. It lay wrecked at the base of Rough Ridge, roughly a quarter-mile shy of the planned shoot site. The thing was pancaked against the boulders, crushed like it had been snatched skyward and slammed back down. Yet nothing added up. No tire streaks on the approach road, no trace of breaching the barrier. It rested amid the stones as if it had plummeted straight from the clouds. Their filming kit was strewn over 3 separate summits. Bulky stuff like stands, lenses, and light setups. Pieces had jammed into fissures on sheer walls climbing 200 feet, spots that'd demand a pro climber half a day to scale. For the air currents to haul that load so distant, they'd have needed force beyond any gust I'd ever logged. My own readouts were haywire as well. The pressure gauge spat out figures that defied logic for this elevation. The anemometer whirred at a blur, threatening to snap free from its bracket. Strangest part? The atmosphere hung utterly motionless, without even a whisper stirring. I radioed for airlift backup, but the chopper jockey struggled to hover. Quote, 199, quote, he buzzed down. Quote, 200, quote, pure meteorological madness. That's when I spotted the operator. He'd snagged on the wind vane atop the summit lookout, dangling 200 feet beyond safe access. The guy was skewered clean through the torso, limbs splayed out as if mid-flight. Agony locked his features, yet his gaze locked upward, fixed on whatever horror had claimed him. No natural gale could hoist an adult that far and pin him so exact. Even the wildest typhoon blasts scatter wildly. They don't pose corpses like macabre ornaments. Gazing up at the body from below, a chill gripped me for the first time in 2 decades patrolling these heights. Goose flesh prickled my skin, unrelated to any static I could detect. The very atmosphere turned heavy, charged with anticipation, akin to the hush right before a bolt cracks the sky. Then came the sound, faint whispers building to a chorus, born on gusts that didn't exist, murmuring in an alien tongue that somehow pierced my thoughts. They urged me away, warning this domain no longer welcomed my kind. For the initial time in my career atop these crags, doubt crept in about those ancient Cherokee warnings. Perhaps unseen forces stirred within the breezes, defying charts of fronts and thermals. Perhaps I'd soon learn the full folly of my skepticism toward the winds. Pushing the hunt deeper into grandfather's forbidden heights pulled me beyond any prior venture. Tourists wisely shun those crown elevations for good cause. Raw stone slabs lashed by unrelenting air, treacherous even on mild days. But serenity had fled the elements now. Every tool in my pack screamed the same baffling tale, velocities leaping from 0 to 60 miles per hour in heartbeats, then plunging to vacuum quiet. Heat, plunging 40 degrees across one stride. My directional needle whirled uselessly, lost to true bearings. I came upon the anchor first. Lisa Chen, her ID read, a driven sort around 25, the type who thrived in the cutthroat world of on-camera reporting. She perched lotus-style on a sheer outcrop, midway up the northern slope, 100 feet from any feasible ascent. Her outfit remained pristine, body unmarked by harm. She simply sat, eyes locked on the sprawling basin far below, as though anticipating an arrival. Quote 201, quote. I shouted upward. Quote 202, quote. Slowly, she tilted her face my way, and I caught the subtle motion of her lips. Yet the sounds that filled my ears didn't originate from her spot. They echoed from every direction, borne on breezes that defied natural flow. He's coming for all of you now, the voice declared, even as her mouth shaped unrelated syllables. The wanderer amid the clouds, the one your kind banished long ago. Up even higher stood the audio technician, perched impossibly on the summit of the mountain's radio antenna, a towering 150 feet of metal framework and support cables. And there he was, steady as if on firm earth, gesturing with deliberate measured sweeps of his arms, as though directing some unseen symphony. Quote 205 I yelled. Quote 206 But he neither tumbled nor swayed. The gusts were cradling him. That's when it hit me. The atmosphere itself was profoundly amiss. With 28 years as a weather expert, 8 in service, and 2 decades patrolling these ridges, I understood every airflow, every typical shift. But this broke all rules. The currents ignored physics, obeying an alien force instead. I keyed my radio for backup, but only crackle responded. The atmosphere was warping signals too, twisting them into illogical paths. All my gear, the communicator, the locator, the atmospheric sensors, either failed outright or spat out impossible data. Then I spotted him. Initially, I dismissed it as thermal haze lifting off the stone, the kind that warps views on sweltering afternoons. But at this elevation, temps hovered near 30 degrees. No cause for such mirages. The haze coalesced gradually, like faint script emerging on unseen parchment. A lofty form, at least 7 feet tall, drifting aloft without ground contact. His form resembled vapor, shades of slate and ivory, ever in flux. Garments fluttered in a draft that spared everything else nearby. And those eyes, God preserve me, they mirrored thunderheads right before the bolts fly. He fixed his gaze on me. I bolted, but the breezes had plans. They shoved my shoulders, tugged my torso, assaulted from flanks simultaneously. My boots lifted off the ledge briefly, just enough to grasp the news team's plight. This entity, whatever its nature, could lift humans skyward. Quote 207 quoted intoned, the phrase booming from all sides. Underscore underscore. Quote underscore 208. Underscore underscore. I barely regained footing on the crag. The winds toyed with me, a predator amusing itself with prey, granting illusions of command only to strip them away. Quote 209. Quote, I shouted, unsure if addressing the silhouette or the gales. Quote 210. Quote 211. Quote, the answer thundered. Quote 212. Quote. He gestured at the journalist's gear strewn over the summits. Instantly, every metallic item, lenses, stands, lines, even jacket fasteners, flared with an icy azure gleam. Your folk arrived with boom makers and steel steeds, he went on. They buried my kin and erected their sky plunder altars on holy soil. Now you arrive with thunder-snaring crates and implements that tally wines as your property. Then it dawned. This transcended mere atmospheric oddity. It was ancient, furious, vastly beyond my forecasting expertise. One of the Cherokee air guardians from the ancient tales. And he'd reached his limit with intruders blind to the peril they stirred. The journalist and tech remained elevated in their defying spots, but clearly puppets now, the gales puppeteering them like playthings in a giant's grasp, sustaining them for motives I dared not ponder. Please, I urged, forcing calm into my tone. Release them. They had no idea this was hallowed. His mirth rustled like gale-whipped evergreens in a squall. Ignorance excuses nothing, he retorted. Your contraptions have already roused the unrousable. Harm ripples from each reading, each transmission, each bid to tame the untamable. Sparks arced between his digits. Cloudless though the vault above, barometric plunge made my sinuses ache, and metallic tang coated my mouth. The aerial guardian was merely warming up. The event that unfolded next revealed the wind's genuine might far beyond anything 2 decades of weather research could impart. The entity lifted its arms skyward, and the atmosphere encircling Grandfather Mountain swirled like liquid draining from a basin. Foliage, scattered stones, abandoned recording gear, and even the drifting clouds above all joined the vortex. Yet this wasn't the disorder of a typical twister. It was deliberate, exact, intentional. The being was forging an aerial formation no natural force could replicate. "Observe how your tools deceive you," it declared, as my anemometer whirled out of control and shattered right from its fixture. They track the wind's effects, not its essence. Such devices grasp only the breeze the spirit has already abandoned, never the animating force itself. In dread, I saw the journalist and audio tech lifted into the currents, drifting like debris in a whirlwind. But there was no wild flinging. They were transported gently, placed precisely as the spirit intended. Lisa Chen passed mere inches from me, near enough for a grasp. Her gaze brimmed with fear, yet her form remained secure within the otherworldly gust's hold. "This defies belief," I whispered, then wished I'd stayed silent. The entity's focus shifted entirely to me, and in an instant, I hovered 20 feet aloft, buoyed solely by the breeze. It resembled suspension in unseen grasp, steady without pressure, strong without harm. I could inhale deeply, shift my limbs freely, but direction eluded my command. "Defies belief?" the spirit queried, bearing me upward along the slope. "Your kind erects vast metropolises convinced they've mastered the heavens. Aircraft presume dominion over the atmosphere. Structures defy tempests eternally. Gauges claim foresight into tomorrow's formations. We ascended beyond the timberline, beyond the broadcast spire, beyond the summit proper. I soared loftier than any unassisted human ever had, sustained by the resolve of an entity predating my forebears' sea voyage. Yet you've overlooked the foundational reality. The wind serves not at your whim. You exist to serve it. When that slips your mind, the wind enforces the lesson." It unveiled visions forbidden to weathermen, the inner contours of storm fronts, where each cyclone's core harbors not tranquility, but elder beings akin to it. How bolts select routes via ethereal bonds, not mere conductance. Why certain ridges spawn their own climates while others adhere to routines. Grandfather Mountain pulsed with life, had forever, and our atmospheric knowledge merely skimmed the surface of profounder truths, intricate and vast. Your media folk arrive wielding metallic storm rods. The spirit clarified as we glided over the crests. Each broadcast, each image hurled through the ether. They ripped tears in the veil dividing realms. You've been shredding the firmament, transmission by transmission. Far below, more of the broadcast team came into view. The director perched on an improbable outcrop, limbs outstretched as if welcoming the gale. The illumination expert sat lotus-style suspended, dangling over a 500-foot abyss on gusts alone. All endured unscathed, yet all were ensnared. "Why not end us outright?" I demanded, half dreading the reply. "Death falls short as retribution," the spirit answered. "First, grasp your transgressions before oblivion claims you. Witness the harm your aerial intrusions inflict on the peak." It transported me to an unseen facet of Grandfather Mountain, a secluded glen inaccessible by path. The stone there felt ancient, etched with glyphs seemingly sculpted by gales, not mortal tools. Amid those timeless etchings lay strewn artifacts of our era, shards of meteorological orbs, fractured aerial masts, satellite debris plummeting from orbit. Each emitted that eerie azure glow I'd noted earlier, as if tainted by an alien malaise. "This is the toll your inquiries exact on holy grounds," the spirit intoned. Each sensor, each emission, each bid to harness or foresee the skies etches a blemish. Injuries accumulate across seasons, eras, until the range itself weakens. I sensed it then, a distortion in the ether unrelated to metrics of heat or density. The mountains suffered, its anguish rippling through every draft, every front, every tempest brushing these heights. The Cherokee understood this well. The entity went on, underscore, quote underscore 219, underscore gently. It placed me on a slim outcrop, though I sensed the gusts lingering around me, poised to lift me away once more if I attempted to flee. Quote, 220, quote, the entity declared. Quote, 221, quote, gazing below at the journalist and the rest, suspended in unnatural poses amid the summits, I understood they weren't merely ensnared. They were preserved as a stark lesson, a vivid exhibit of the consequences for those who introduced sky-capturing devices to holy terrains. Yet, there was a new undercurrent in the entity's tone. Urgency, isolation, suffering. This went beyond safeguarding revered land. It was a fight for existence. The Cherokee wind entities were fading, tainted by years of electromagnetic contamination. And this one was staging its final defense atop the Soul Summit, robust enough to sustain its essence. Underscore, quote, underscore, 222, underscore, I inquired. The entity's features softened, and briefly, I glimpsed not a fearsome elemental power, but a beleaguered sentinel battling to preserve the planet's final remnant of ancient traditions. Quote, 223, quote, it urged. Quote, 224, quote, bolts of electricity sparked anew between its digits. But now they seemed inviting rather than menacing. It was like being handed an instrument, an opportunity to mend what had fractured over endless time. I glanced at the radio tower, then at the hovering broadcast team, then at the basin riddled with tech-inflicted wounds invisible to any human sight until this moment. 2 decades in mountain search and rescue screamed at me to decline, to seek an alternative path, to negotiate with an force plainly beyond negotiation. But nearly 3 decades studying meteorology convinced me the entity spoke truth. We'd been toxifying the atmosphere, broadcast by broadcast, and now the reckoning had arrived. The dilemma boiled down to whose counsel I'd heed. Surprisingly, the resolution formed without much struggle. Perhaps it stemmed from witnessing the anguish in that valley of shattered gadgets, or perhaps from grasping at last that certain priorities eclipse human ease. In any case, I uttered phrases I'd never imagined voicing. Instruct me on the steps. The entity's gaze ignited like thunder hidden in thunderheads. You must lay your hands on the structure as I direct the peak's electric surge through it. The steel will liquefy, the broadcasts will cease, and restoration can commence. I stared at the radio tower. 150 feet of iron and circuitry that linked communications across half the Blue Ridge Parkway. Raising it would sever vital alerts, forecasts, and coordination for vast swaths of rugged wilderness. It might also end my life. The audio technician, the entity clarified, tracing my stare skyward. He attempted to scale the tower right as the gales seized him. His form now acts as a bridge, linking ground to heavens. As the current courses through the framework, it will pass through him, too. You're demanding I take a life. I'm requesting your aid in mending a perishing range, the entity countered. The TV fellow opted to ascend toward the sky-plundering steel. He integrated himself into the apparatus harming the land. His destiny was determined by his choices. The winds lifted me once more, bearing me to the tower's foundation. From this vantage, the entity's words rang clear. The sound tech wasn't simply perched at the summit. He was merged with it. His grasp on the antenna grid had transformed, his digits turning to metal, embedding into the gear like tendrils into earth. The more the steel lingers on hallowed soil, the wider its corruption spreads, the entity explained. It taints the atmosphere first, then the ground, then the bodies of its devotees. Your colleague above is now one with the contraption. I noticed further alterations. The fellow's flesh gleamed with a steely luster. His eyes emitted the identical icy azure glow as the dispersed devices. When his lips parted, interference crackled forth rather than speech. He was no longer mortal. Perhaps ceased being so the instant his skin met that tower. If I proceed, I ventured, what becomes of the rest? The anchor. The executive. They descend to solid ground, the entity assured. They retreat to their mechanical cages and wired existences, but the memory lingers. They warn the world of the peril-facing sky raiders who invade holy sites uninvited. Electric arcs gathered in the entity's grasp, snapping like ensnared celestial fire. The atmospheric weight plunged so sharply my eardrums throbbed. All the metallic items atop the peak started vibrating with buildup of static electricity. The tempest approaches, the entity declared, regardless of your involvement. Yet if you direct the bolt precisely, it will strike swiftly and purely. Refuse, and it will rage unchecked, devouring every conductive material within a 50-meter radius. Decide. Sky interpreter. Decide. My mind turned to Sarah, my daughter, secure in her distant college quarters 300 miles off. I considered the throngs of visitors flocking annually to Grandfather Mountain, oblivious to treading on hallowed terrain. I reflected on the myriad ranger outposts, signal masts, and climate sensors dotting the Blue Ridge, shielding folks from the peak's tempests. And I pondered the Cherokee clans exiled from these summits over 150 years prior, bequeathing merely tales of aerial guardians and holy elevations incomprehensible to arriving pale intruders. The entity spoke truth. We'd pilfered the heavens incrementally, via gadgets and wires, oblivious to the atmosphere's inherent sovereignty, its essence, its timeless dominion over these ridges. Fine, I agreed. I'll assist. The instant my palms met the tower's steel foundation, agony surged through every fiber of me like inferno. The bolt cascaded from the entity's grasp, along the framework, past the tainted audio tech still merged with the aerial setup, and deep into Grandfather Mountain's core stone. The range's anguish became mine. More than 150 years of intrusions hammered into holy soil. Broadcast pulses slicing ethereal trails, digital transmissions fracturing the timeless currents of gales and skies that had thrived here for millennia. Yet I sensed the peak's solace, too, as the structure softened and liquefied. The tech's cries dissolved into interference, then nothingness, the surge erasing alloy and tissue alike, yielding only pristine atmosphere and charred stone. Every tech device across the height fizzled and failed. My communicator, navigator, the climate outpost, even the timer on my arm, all ruined in one pulse. The entity let go of the broadcast team's others, and they tumbled softly earthward, out cold, yet breathing. The anchor dropped beside me, her gaze steadying, inhalations deep and rhythmic. She'd survive. They'd all endure, but the memory would linger. The mast toppled with a rumble akin to peals of thunder, demolishing the viewing platform and scattering embers wide. But those embers mended rather than harmed, purging the tech blemishes amassed from human meddling over decades. As the remnants hardened and stilled, a novel sensation washed over me, breezes flowing as nature intended, untamed, pure, unbound, guided by the mountain's vital force, not mere barometrics or thermal shifts. The Cherokee Gale Guardian dissolved with the sun's dip toward the west, reverting to wavering haze. The peak recalls at last, he intoned, born on a gust, like a blessing. The firmament reclaims its domain, though restoration just commences. Ensure the alloy affliction doesn't recur. How so? I queried. You grasp the ancient methods now, he answered. You've touched the range's authentic soul. Impart that wisdom. Instruct folks to discern true omens in gusts and clouds. Aid their grasp that certain sights defy mechanical incursion. Nearly vanished, a mere ripple in the dusk, yet his parting message rode the zephyr distinctly. And heed this, sky reader. The Gale Guardians ever observe. The formal account pinned it on an aberrant whirlwind. Unexplained aerial anomaly. Broadcast spire felled by bolt impact. TV team discovered senseless, devoid of recollections. Soul loss. Audio handler seemingly hit by strike while scaling mast amid brutal conditions. No one challenged my account. As the weather authority, I'd tracked ridge patterns for 2 decades. If I called it a twister, it was one. The reality remained mine, and the mountains alone. The broadcast group mended fully, save for blanks after rigging their gear at dawn. Lisa Chen returned to Charlotte, shunning storm coverage henceforth. The director sought reassignment to athletics. The illuminator left broadcasting cold, joining Florida's Park Service, farthest from heights possible. Subconsciously, they recalled. Officials opted against restoring the spire. Cost prohibitive, excessive strike hazard, they claimed. Rather than rebuilding, officials relocated the emergency radio operations to a site 30 miles southward, far from the summit of Grandfather Mountain. I chose not to challenge that choice. Half a year afterward, I sat down with Cherokee Nation elders and shared details on the peculiar atmospheric shifts atop Grandfather Mountain. I emphasized how indigenous ecological insights could enhance contemporary weather forecasting and proposed that certain areas might benefit from reverting to ancient methods of interpreting storms and gusts. They heard me out with courtesy, yet their expressions revealed they had long understood this truth, simply holding out for an outsider like me to catch on. These days, I collaborate with them on safeguarding holy grounds, educating visitors about time-honored Cherokee insights into weather patterns, and guiding folks to appreciate that these peaks offer more than picturesque views or spots for broadcasting gear. My forecasts have sharpened beyond anything before, not due to superior tech, but because I've cut back on gadgets and instead attuned myself to the whispers of the breeze, the temperament of the ridges and the subtle cues no gauge can capture. On serene afternoons with motionless air, I occasionally hike to the former radio tower site. Only weathered stone remains, along with subtle Cherokee etchings shaped by erosion over ages, not chisels. If I strain to hear, faint murmurs ride on currents that spare the surrounding air. These are the wind entities present eons before my ancestors sailed from afar, enduring long past when we regain reverence for the heavens. They observe ceaselessly, gauging whether we've truly grasped the message or must endure its repetition. The peak holds on to its memories. The real wonder is whether we will. Just last week, a tech firm contacted park authorities about placing advanced weather gear on Grandfather Mountain, cutting-edge tools like Doppler systems, air quality detectors, and satellite links. They claimed it would improve storm warnings, protect lives, and push meteorological research forward. I advised against it, urging a different spot. Certain locales are too hallowed for hardware. Some wisdom risks overwhelming mortal comprehension, and certain gales deserve to roam unbound, free from quantification, forecasting, or digital distortions that reduce vibrant atmospheres to lifeless stats. The Cherokee Wind Guardians showed me as much. Should folks overlook the initial warning, though, the range possesses endless patience to reiterate it. The gusts endure, yet their mercy has limits, and they never stop keeping vigil. I'm Benjamin Calfire, and for 17 years I've served as a ranger in the Coal River Valley. Folks often find my surname odd for an environmental steward, given that my kin have extracted coal from these hills across 3 generations. You might call it a change of allegiance. The alert arrived on a frigid Tuesday morning in February, with frost clinging to branches like shattered panes. My mug of coffee was still hot when the dispatch radio buzzed. "Ben, trouble brewing by the abandoned Whitesville pits," Sheriff Morris reported, his tone strained. "Those city eco-activists vanished 3 days back." I recognized whom he referenced. A group of 5 from Charleston, there to record the scars of mountaintop mining. They'd snapped photos of the denuded slopes and the rusty runoff seeping from derelict shafts. The coal outfit wasn't pleased. "Their last ping?" I queried, grabbing my kit. "Track and place them close to the old Deep Creek workings right before contact dropped." That was the shaft shuttered after the '89 disaster. I recalled it vividly. 27 workers lost to a methane blast. The operators poured concrete and rebar over it, deeming body retrieval too hazardous. My own granddad had toiled in those passages prior to the gas buildup. Navigating to Deep Creek demanded 40 minutes along twisty, iced-over trails, requiring full off-road traction throughout. The terrain resembled a colossal wound, former woodlands replaced by stark, leveled expanses of exposed stone and toxic earth. I pulled up beside the activists' vehicle, untouched since their departure. Within, gear lay strewn about, cameras, pollution analyzers, logs brimming with data. One journal lay agape at a chilling entry. Sample 47, Deep Creek Portal, pH 2.1, akin to battery acid. Vivid orange hue indicates severe iron leaching. Portal seems freshly tampered with. Seal displays novel fractures. I glanced toward the opening about 50 yards off. Indeed, the barrier entombing the passage for 3 decades bore unmistakable recent fractures. It looked like somebody had blown the barrier apart from within. That defied all logic. The mine had no alternate access points, no other entrances or exits. As I neared the opening, I glanced at my air gauge. The indicator spiked right into the red, signaling lethal concentrations of methane, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon monoxide, gases that could claim your life without warning. Yet there were additional odors wafting out, foul and decaying, reminiscent of spoiled flesh baking under the sun. The gap was barely wide enough for a single person to squeeze inside. Around the perimeter, newly churned earth bore impressions of boots heading inward, but nothing indicated anyone had emerged. 5 distinct tracks from the vanished protesters. And then there were these odd impressions in the dirt, resembling handprints, but distorted. Elongated fingers, excessive joints. I keyed the radio to reach Sheriff Morris. "I'm outside Deep Creek Mine. The barrier's compromised. Tracks show the missing folks entered, but the atmosphere's toxic. Can you send a team to retrieve them?" Gazing into the shadowy void carved into the hillside, a chill knotted in my gut. "I'll give it a shot, but I require reinforcements and full respirators. Morris, this goes beyond a standard search. There's something seriously off here." "How so?" My eyes fixed on those bizarre prints in the soil. Upon closer inspection, they covered the area, as if made by someone scuttling on hands and knees. Yet they were far too large for any person's palms. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 2, 3, 3, underscore, underscore. I trailed off, the idea unraveling into absurdity. Unless inhabitants had lingered in the depths all that time. Backup took 2 hours to show. Deputy Sarah Chen arrived with rescue respirators borrowed from the district fire station, plus handheld air analyzers and coils of rope that could span continents. She was reliable, sharp, and unfazed by shadows. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 234, underscore, 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 she inquired, testing her air supply. Quote 235. Quote 236. I replied. Quote 237. We secured our lines and ventured inside side by side. The passage descended sharply into the rock, our helmet lights piercing only about 20 feet into the gloom. The atmosphere hung heavy and damp, like inhaling through soaked cloth. Our initial discovery was a shattered camera belonging to one of the activists, lodged against the side of the passage. The data card remained viable, so I tucked it away. Further along, we spotted shredded fabric scraps and ominous smears along the coal surfaces that might have been blood. Sarah murmured, her beam fixed on the wall. Etched crudely into the coal with some pointed tool were the words, quote, 239, and beneath, quote, 240, quote, 241. I wondered aloud. Quote, 242. Pressing onward along the primary corridor into the Earth's heart, the vintage diagrams indicated a drop of 800 feet to the primary vein. But the layout we encountered bore no resemblance to those charts. The route branched into countless narrow offshoots, akin to the intricate lines of a leaf's veins. Certain passages demanded belly crawling, others expanded into vast cavities capable of accommodating a vehicle. Everyone bore evidence of fresh excavation. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 243, underscore, underscore. I confided in Sarah. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 244, underscore, underscore. That's when the noise reached us, a grating drag, as if a massive weight scraped over rock. It originated from the mind's recesses, bouncing through the passages until its source blurred in our ears. We advanced another 100 yards down the central path before stumbling upon the first corpse. Marcus Webb, among the eco-activists. His vivid red coat remained, but little else was identifiable. He'd been savagely ripped asunder. I spare the gruesome particulars. Certain horrors defy narration, but suffice it to say, it appeared his assailant had been gorging repeatedly over time. Sarah retched violently. I nearly joined her, but steadied myself to survey the carnage. The gashes weren't consistent with any beast in my knowledge. The scratches were unnaturally uniform, evoking overgrown human nails. Yet no such nails could rend flesh and skeleton so profoundly. Quote, 245, Sarah urged, clearing her throat. Quote 246. I was on the verge of concurring when a sound halted us cold, voices, undeniably human, drifting from the mind's interior. Help! Please! Help us! Faint and reverberant, yet unmistakably from at least 2, possibly 3 individuals. The rest of the group, I stated. Sarah clutched my sleeve. Ben, it might be an ambush. The thing that got Marcus could lurk ahead. They're out there, breathing. Abandoning them isn't an option. The pleas echoed once more, nearer now. Please. Injured. Trapped inside. In that instant, I chose the path that likely preserved us both, though it stung like retreat. I clasped Sarah's wrist and tugged her back toward daylight. I declared. We bolted through the passages quicker than caution allowed, tripping over splintered supports and scattered stones. Trailing us, the voices persisted, but they shifted, growing lower, more frantic. No longer pleading for aid, they were summoning us by name. Benjamin, Sarah, stay with us. I hadn't shared my name with anyone in those depths. We erupted from the shaft into the dim February light, gasping like survivors surfacing from a submerged wreck. Right away, I summoned a complete crisis response. State troopers, expert mine rescuers, hazardous materials crew, everything available. Yet while we lingered for reinforcements, my mind fixated on those calls. How could they know who we were? And why did they carry that ravenous edge? Just before dusk, the State Mine Rescue Unit showed up, hauling gear capable of boring straight to the planet's core. Captain Rodriguez, a seasoned pro with 2 decades under his belt, had extracted more trapped workers from crumbling passages than any expert in the state. Quote 254 he inquired, eyeing the portal. I recounted the vanished protesters, the corpse we'd discovered, and the cries seeking assistance. I skipped the detail about them using our names. It came off as unhinged, even in my own ears. Gas readings showed lethal concentrations: methane, hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, along with an unidentified toxin. Rodriguez gave a somber nod. We'll deploy self-contained breathing apparatus and operate in trios. No one strays. No advancing beyond 500 feet without a status update. His crew was sharp, battle-tested. They'd encountered every horror a mine could offer, but not whatever lurked here. The initial group reached 200 feet when their comms cut out. Protocol called for a 15-minute hold before dispatching reserves. We stretched it to 30. Still nothing. The follow-up squad located the pioneers' scattered tools, masks, transmitters, all abandoned in the corridor, yet unmarked by wear or conflict. It resembled the sudden disappearance of 3 adult men into nothingness. "This doesn't sit well," Rodriguez muttered. "There's trouble brewing below." That's when the blast echoed from the depths, rumbling like distant thunder across the ridge. The earth quivered beneath us, expelling a plume of debris and fumes from the opening. Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 258 underscore underscore, a voice shouted. Rodriguez was already radioing for massive digging machinery. But I recognized it wasn't structural failure. The noise felt engineered, intentional. Explosives had detonated inside. Come dawn, we resumed with industrial drills and a rigging setup, aiming to bore a side tunnel for a fresh approach. When the initial core samples emerged, though, they prompted a collective retreat. Bones, human remnants, yet distorted, slender in spots, bulky elsewhere, as if elongated and squashed simultaneously. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the state forensic pathologist, glanced at them and immediately requested Federal Health Agency support. She pulled me aside for a confidential chat. "Ben, I've analyzed skeletons for a decade and a half," she explained. "These defy standard human physiology. The mass is off, the form is off, even the molecular makeup doesn't align." "What do you mean?" "I'm telling you, they started as human, but underwent some alteration, something defying all logic." That evening, back at my place, I dug into every scrap of info on Deep Creek Mine. The revelations left me regretting my entanglement. Blackstone Energy Corporation had run the operation. The very outfit hit with charges of unlawful hazardous waste disposal in the 80s. They'd battled countless suits from relatives alleging contamination led to deformities, tumors, and illnesses. Whispers extended further, though. Hushed tales of clandestine trials, treating laborers as guinea pigs for corporate toxins. No evidence stuck, but the volume of reports suggested grains of truth. I uncovered files on the 1989 disaster, claiming 27 lives. The deeper I delved, the firmer my suspicion that it was sabotage, not mishap. The blast occurred in an inactive zone, and logs indicated stable air quality that shift. Clearly, someone had ignited it on purpose. But the motive? I was absorbed in the documents when my cell buzzed. Sarah sounded strained, panicked. "Ben, hurry to the site!" "What's the issue?" Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 263 underscore underscore, transmitting what? Underscore, underscore, quote underscore 264 underscore underscore. I sped to Deep Creek, over shadowy winding paths, beams slicing through unusually dense mist. At the location, the static from his radio reached me from half a football field off. The distorted voice cutting through the interference belonged to the vanished security guard, Jim Morrison, though it carried an unnatural depth and tension. "This is Unit 7 calling for urgent backup. I'm stuck in the deepest shafts. There's something else here with me." Rodriguez attempted to reply. "Jim, Captain Rodriguez here. Give me your exact position. They're not like they were before." Oh, God. They started as miners, but the toxins, the trials, the transmission cut out for what felt like an eternity. Then Jim's tone returned, altered in a chilling way, unnervingly serene. "Forget it. Just a mix-up. All clear below." Head back home, everyone. Rodriguez and I exchanged uneasy glances. That wasn't Jim Morrison speaking anymore. We have to shut this mine for good, I declared. No way we can risk whatever's lurking below escaping. But Rodriguez's gaze shifted beyond me, fixated on the mine's mouth. Ben, he murmured softly. See? Beyond the reach of our beams, in the shadows, figures stirred, silhouettes resembling people yet distorted. They advanced on all fours while somehow remaining erect, and their eyes caught the light, like those of beasts in the night. They were emerging from the depths. The beings that surfaced from the Deep Creek mine had origins in humanity. Faint remnants of their past lives lingered, a band of gold on a malformed finger, a helmet merged into bone, sturdy boots melded to appendages that defied human form. Yet 3 decades under the influence of Blackstone's hazardous trials had warped them beyond recognition. Their flesh resembled soot-covered coal, limbs elongated and contorted unnaturally, digits extended into talons capable of shredding stone, driven by an insatiable craving. Rodriguez's squad unleashed a barrage right away, yet the rounds hardly impeded their progress. These entities darted with impossible speed for their bulk, skittering across boulders and machinery akin to arachnids. "The vehicles!" I shouted. "Get to the trucks, all of you!" But we'd already been encircled. Scores of them, perhaps hundreds, closed in. Some slithered low to the earth. Others scaled walls as if on level terrain. Amid the frenzy, I lost sight of Rodriguez and the bulk of his men. Sarah clutched my sleeve. The gear storage, solid steel construction. We bolted toward the compact structure housing the tools, securing the iron barrier moments before a massive force battered it from the exterior. The frame rattled with every blow, yet the metal endured. "What in hell are those?" Sarah panted. "Miners," I replied. "Survivors of the 1989 disaster. They didn't perish. Blackstone ran secret tests in those depths, dosing employees with prototype compounds." The blast wasn't accidental death. It sealed them away with their lab specimens. Peering through a narrow pane, I watched the horde scour the site with deliberate precision. Their actions showed cunning, probing each truck, each potential shelter. This went beyond primal predation. They possessed intellect. One drew near our vantage. Under the stark floodlights, its visage came into sharp focus for the first time. Amid the ebony hide and warped contours, familiarity struck. "Tommy Kowalski," I breathed. Tommy, a longtime buddy of my dad's, among those lost in the '89 blast. But he hadn't truly perished. Instead, he'd mutated into this abomination, confined below ground for 3 decades, his essence eroding bit by bit. As though sensing his name, Tommy's gaze snapped to the glass. His irises had shifted to the corrosive hue of tainted runoff. Yet briefly, a spark of awareness flickered. He lifted a taloned appendage, flattening it to the pane. His lips formed silent syllables I could decipher. "Help us." In that instant, clarity hit. These weren't mere predators after us. They sought connection, a way to convey a message. I eased the window open a fraction. Tommy. Tommy Kowalski. The entity that was once Tommy inclined its head gradually. Its utterance grated like debris tumbling through iron pipes. Blackstone's still active, still testing. "Where, Tommy?" "Lowest strata. Corporate files. Fresh bodies required." At his back, the pack halted their pursuit. Everyone fixed on me, expectant. They're gearing up to repeat it, I told Sarah. The trials. That's the draw for the eco-protesters, new guinea pigs. Tommy leaned in firmer. Halt them. Torch the documents first, stop the dispersal. To other pits, other ranges, the poisons. Production ongoing. Only then did the breadth of Blackstone Energy's atrocities dawn on me. Deep Creek was merely one hub. Their network spanned Appalachia, exploiting remote dig sites as labs for toxins or biohazards. And the nightmare persisted. Where's the documentation, Tommy? Subterranean floor, former management suites, but watch for sentries. Real people guarding. I turned to Sarah. We need to head back inside that mine. Are you out of your mind? If Tommy's telling the truth, Blackstone's still running those tests, still turning folks into these abominations. We can't let them expand to other spots. We've got to bring it all to light. Tommy bobbed his head wildly in agreement. Nearby, the rest of the transformed beings started emitting noises. Not exactly words, but close enough to sound like they were on board. Will they assist us? Sarah wondered. Gazing into Tommy's glowing orange gaze, I caught a glimpse of the unexpected, a spark of optimism. Absolutely, I replied. They're on our side because they crave an end to this nightmare just like we do. We all departed the storage building as a group, 2 ordinary people, flanked by 36 ex-miners who'd morphed into something unrecognizable. They guided us through the passages of the Deep Creek mine, navigating the depths with an intimacy far surpassing their knowledge of the outside. The further down we ventured, the clearer the signs of Blackstone's active work became. Brand new gear, signs of fresh digging, and even more disturbing containment areas that had housed test subjects not long ago. Reaching the lowest floor, we uncovered the prize, a concealed network of workspaces and labs kept humming by a subterranean power source. Rows of cabinets hugged the walls, stuffed with decades' worth of trial documentation spanning 30 years. And there, stationed behind a desk in the central room, fully alert and utterly mortal, sat Dr. Marcus Webb, the very identity tied to one of the vanished eco-campaigners. Quote, 266, quote, he stated with composure. Quote, 267. Quote, Dr. Webb showed no shock at our intrusion, nor at the sight of the beings who used to be his workers. He merely adjusted his spectacles and motioned toward the documents strewn over his workspace. 3 decades of study, he noted. 3 decades honing the shift into something superior. Do you grasp the worth of that information to certain purchasers? You're continuing to test on humans, I accused, while claiming to elevate them. Our creations possess greater strength, tougher endurance, the ability to thrive where regular people would perish. Picture the uses. Ventures into outer space, subsea building projects, hazardous material disposal. I glanced at Tommy, who loomed next to me, his taloned fists balled tight. Is that what you call enhancement? The initial experiments were a bit crude, Webb conceded. Yet, we've polished the method extensively. The latest ones keep their complete mental acuity alongside boosted bodily prowess. Those absent campaigners are aiding our progress. Willingly, naturally, after grasping the advantages. Sarah advanced, her palm resting on her duty pistol. You're detained for abduction, homicide, and unauthorized human trials. Webb smirked. I doubt that, Deputy. After all, you're invading restricted land. This facility is Blackstone Energy's domain, operating non-stop via a unique government deal since 1989. All our actions here fall squarely within the law. He activated a switch on his desk, and the thud of sturdy footsteps reverberated from the corridor. Half a dozen figures in dark combat suits stormed in, rifles at the ready. Government hires, Webb clarified, empowered to apply deadly measures in defense of sensitive projects. That's when Tommy broke his silence. His gravelly rumble shook the space like a subterranean tremor. Enough. The horde surged with blinding speed, outpacing the security team's response. Years in the shadows had honed them into lethal hunters. The clash wrapped up almost instantly. Webb attempted an escape, but Tommy snagged him at the threshold. For an instant, I feared the being would shred the physician as he'd done to countless before. But instead, Tommy hoisted Webb airborne and met his stare. Quote, _268 Tommy growled. You made us into beasts. Yet enough humanity lingers in us to seek fairness over vengeance. Gently, he lowered Webb and indicated the document holders. Quote, _269, Tommy commanded. I collected each dossier, each data storage unit, every scrap of scientific material from that buried setup. Sarah located potent solvents capable of igniting fiercely enough to obliterate it all. As fire raced across the administrative area, blasts echoed from the mine's inner reaches. The group was bringing down the shafts, entombing the test zones for good. We surfaced right as the whole Deep Creek network caved in. The peak trembled for 5 full minutes, and in the aftermath, only debris marked the former portal. Tommy and his fellow Changed Ones remained by our side, observing their buried realm vanish. Bathed in dawn's glow, they appeared somehow more like their old selves, altered, scarred by long-term toxin effects, but echoing the individuals they'd been long ago. What's next? I queried Tommy. He eyed the climbing sun with vision unaccustomed to brightness. We hunt down the remaining facilities, he declared, the additional shafts where Blackstone persists in these trials. We halt them before they spawn more of our kind. Then Tommy grinned, and in that instant, he resembled the fellow my dad had met 3 decades earlier. After that, we take a break. Dr. Webb made it through alive, unlike the federal contractors. The FBI took him into custody, hitting him with charges of numerous murders, abductions, and breaches of human testing regulations. The ensuing probe uncovered Blackstone Energy's illicit activities across 17 states, sparking the biggest ecological restoration effort ever in the Appalachians. Yet on those quiet nights when I'm scouting the ridges, faint noises echo from the hidden depths below. Whispers that could belong to people, or perhaps not. And it leaves me pondering how many more folks like Tommy Kowalski linger in those shadows, hoping for rescue to guide them back. The mining outfits claim they've turned over a new leaf. They swear the era of unlawful waste disposal and twisted experiments is history. But I've picked up a key lesson about vows from those coal barons. They're as reliable as the tainted runoff seeping from their forsaken shafts. And whenever that rusty orange flow seems a bit heavier, I sense Tommy and his kind are still around, still tracking, still ensuring the fiends who spawned them won't spawn again. Folks often wonder why I stuck around Coal River Valley through all the chaos. Why not shift to a less hazardous post, one where the earth doesn't conceal horrors ready to engulf you? It's straightforward, really. These hills demand a guardian, one who understands the true beasts aren't the things lurking in derelict pits. The genuine beasts are those in tailored suits churning out profit statements by ravaging all they encounter. As long as such beasts roam free, Coal River Valley requires watchers like myself to keep them from burrowing too far into the earth once more. I'm Samuel Ironside, a ranger in Pisgah National Forest for 16 years now. Over those years patrolling North Carolina's loftiest summits, I figured I'd witnessed every trick these peaks could play. I'd handled 3 avalanche extractions, endless searches for wayward trekkers, and several grim recoveries of climbers who underestimated the bite of 6,000 feet in the cold season. I couldn't have been more mistaken. On December 15, 1979, the alert hit about the vanished meteorologists. A trio of National Weather Service experts had climbed to the Mount Mitchell Summit Station for standard upkeep. 5 days prior, they'd gone silent after day 2 when their final message alluded to trees shifting oddly. That morning, I packed the Ranger truck with essentials, lines, first aid supplies, survival food, and the handheld radio buzzing with interference. At home, my wife Sarah planted a goodbye kiss, urging caution on the heights. Our 8-year-old twins, Emma and Lucy, hardly glanced up from their breakfast bowls, accustomed to Dad vanishing into the wilds whenever trouble struck. The road to Mount Mitchell winds through some of the planet's finest landscapes until it turns lethal. That day, under new fallen snow and with the mercury plunging under zero, it evoked an alien world. The Fraser firs blanketing the high inclines had been perishing for years, victims of the balsam woolly adelgid. Those minuscule pests had wiped out vast woodlands, leaving ghostly frames clawing at a leaden sky. Mount Mitchell rises 6,684 feet above sea level, the tallest east of the Mississippi. The Cherokee named it Atacula, where the spirits gather, a tidbit I'd gleaned from digging into regional lore, a ranger's duty. Back then, I had no clue just how spot on that was. The weather outpost perched on a craggy ledge close to the top, a compact structure packed with gear-tracking gusts, chill, and air pressure. Built to endure 100 miles per hour gales and cold that could frost flesh in moments. When I arrived that morning, the exterior seemed fine, but stepping inside revealed chaos. The scientists' belongings remained. Mugs of coffee, iced over and half consumed, logs crammed with climate notes, effects strewn across the cots. Nothing pointed to Dr. Hayes, Dr. Martinez, or Dr. Chen. The devices hummed on, logging readings that defied logic. The temperature chart showed a sudden 40-degree surge the night before, holding for precisely 13 minutes. In mid-December, at 6,000 feet amid a storm, that defied belief. I called base, described the deserted site. My boss, Tom Crawford, instructed a nearby sweep and to hold for reinforcements, routine for vanishings in the freeze. But what lay beyond the door broke every norm. The Fraser firs encircling the station had been repositioned. I'd visited this location countless times across the years, familiar with every barren trunk and jagged ridge. Yet overnight, the skeletal frames of the Fraser firs had shifted into deliberate formations. Flawless rings and rigid alignments that resembled glyphs from the vantage of the station's lookout platform. Lifeless trees don't relocate on their own, even amid gales hitting 100 miles per hour. That initial day, I conducted searches in widening arcs outward from the outpost, hunting for traces of the vanished researchers. The drifts were heavy, and gusts intensified relentlessly. Eventually, a quarter-mile slope below, I spotted abandoned equipment. A shredded coat, a shattered lantern, and an item that churned my gut. Fragments of bone, numerous ones. Far exceeding what you'd expect from typical animal kills, strewn amid the roots of the withered firs as if excavation had occurred. Certain pieces appeared ancient, discolored to a muddy hue by earth and age. Others seemed recent. Come evening, I hunkered down inside the weather outpost and attempted contact with the lost group across all channels. Nothing but interference responded, save for a brief instant near midnight when faint murmurs echoed what I took for Cherokee words. But that defied logic as well. No Cherokee settlements lay within 50 miles, and the tongue had largely faded from use. My Marine background included meteorological training prior to ranger duties. I understood interpreting atmospheric records, and the outpost's gauges displayed anomalies. Gust flows defied norms, forming eerie still zones amid the storm. Thermometers registered erratic warm patches drifting across the slope like entities in motion, while pressure levels pulsed rhythmically, akin to a pulse. Mount Mitchell harbored something gravely amiss. Still, I'd endured combat, outlasted 3 slides, and rescued over 20 souls from these peaks under lethal weather that ought to have claimed everyone. I assumed I could manage the threat lurking beyond. That proved my second error. The initial one was assuming barren trees stayed rooted. Dawn of the following day brought an unfamiliar drone, a deep vibration seemingly emanating from the woods. I roused before first light, coiled in my bedroll on the station's concrete. Initially, I dismissed it as air whistling through bare limbs, but breezes don't sustain a constant tone for 20 minutes. Venturing out, the chill seared my airways. The resonance amplified, vibrating through my torso like proximity to a massive subwoofer. Snow blanketed the surrounding barren Fraser firs. Beneath the powder, though, something halted me abruptly. The bark undulated, not merely bending with gusts, but truly shifting, waving like liquid beneath the frost. Moreover, the prior day's configurations had evolved. Loops twisted into helices, and the linear paths now directed inward to the woodland's heart. Using my compass to trace the boundary indicators, I located the initial researcher. Dr. Hayes perched at the foot of an enormous withered fir, limbs folded in repose, posture suggesting deep contemplation. Save for the absence of his eyes and his frame stripped utterly bare. Yet predators hadn't dispersed the remains. They retained a precise humanoid outline, bound by an invisible force. His attire remained whole. His wedding band gleamed on his hand. I'd encountered hypothermia fatalities and beast attacks previously, but never this. It resembled a meticulous extraction of all tissue, sparing the rest pristine. The bones shone like new powder and felt heated against the icy backdrop. As I fumbled for my handset to log the discovery, Dr. Hayes's cranium swiveled my way. The device slipped from my grasp. I tumbled back into the drifts. The vacant orbits followed my retreat for lingering moments before freezing. I sprawled there, what seemed an eternity but likely mere minutes, until my pulse eased. Corpses lack the motion to pivot. Skeletons devoid of sinew, ligaments, or bindings absolutely cannot. Compelling myself forward once more, I advanced cautiously, regulating breaths per marine drills. This round, Dr. Hayes remained inert. Yet, crouching to inspect, a hum arose from the trunk at his rear. The barren fur intoned a melody. My handset sparked alive, not with Tom's input from headquarters, but Dr. Hayes's distinct timbre. The trees retain all memories, Sam. They recall the interred here. I snatched it up. Hayes, your position? Hurt? Interference. Then Dr. Martinez's familiar tone. We attempted escape, but the roots delve excessively. The Cherokee understood the peril. I thumbed the button anew. Martinez? Coordinates? Hayes is at grid point. Grid points fail here now. Doctor. Suddenly, Dr. Chen's voice cut in. This mountain now lies beyond ordinary space. The spirits ensured it stayed that way. The voices dissolved into static once more, abandoning me with a skeleton that had inexplicably used the radio. I retreated from Doctor Hayes's corpse and spotted something far more unsettling than the biting December chill. The bone pieces I'd discovered the previous day had shifted during the night. They now formed deliberate designs encircling the roots of withered trees, resembling tiny burial sites. And there were far more remains than earlier. Many more. It felt as if the mountain was unearthing long-hidden truths from decades past. The remainder of the morning saw me tracing the path further into the lifeless woods. Those geometric arrangements of trees guided me to a spot long ago ravaged by clear-cutting, where only jagged stumps and bare earth remained. Yet at the heart of the open space stood a site that clarified the Cherokee's reverence for this land. Time-worn burial mounds, scores of them, laid out in spirals mirroring the patterns of the fallen trees. Many appeared violated, dug up by intruders indifferent to ancient rites. Human bones, arrowheads, and broken pottery lay strewn about, weathered by exposure. The logging outfit. It hit me. They'd bulldozed straight through a sacred Cherokee cemetery, skipping any environmental assessment entirely. The spirits Dr. Chen referenced were no mere symbols. Later that day, I located Dr. Martinez. She clung 20 feet high in a barren Fraser fir, not dangling from gear or snagged on limbs. Instead, her form had fused with the tree, bark enveloping parts of her as if it had enveloped her over time. Her gaze remained alert, conscious. Spotting me, she attempted words. Sam. The faint murmur emanated from the trunk, not her lips. Stop them from burying this. The logging company. They understood the devastation they wrought. Martinez, how long have you been stuck? I'll help you down. No. The trunk quivered, and her fingers twitched faintly inside the wood. This is retribution. We arrived with our equipment much like the loggers. The spirits see no difference between saws and scientific tools. The humming intensified, and motion flickered at the edges of my sight. The other lifeless trees began to rustle sans breeze, their bony limbs extending toward one another as if exchanging signals. Those Fraser firs aren't truly gone. Martinez went on. They're merely dormant. The Adelgid destroyed the vital tissue, but the spirits can revive the remnants. They've safeguarded this cemetery across generations. I scanned the silvery expanse of skeletal forest, grasping at last the Cherokee's view of the mountain's holiness. These were no ordinary trees now. They served as sentinels, stirring to life. On the third day, it dawned on me that rescue was off the table. I was ensnared in a realm that shattered every principle from my meteorology training and 16 years navigating peaks. The station's gear logged absurd readings. No wind amid a fierce snowstorm, yet the barren woods emitted warmth. My GPS flashed __quote_272___, and the compass whirled aimlessly, ignoring north. The mountain had excised itself from conventional reality. That morning, I attempted the descent to the lot via a familiar trail I'd taken countless times. 3 hours in, I circled back to the outpost. I rerouted and tried once more. Identical outcome. The withered Fraser firs blocked every route, their gaunt shapes weaving a labyrinth that rearranged itself beyond my direct view. The tree's hum persisted non-stop, and I began to sense its purpose, not mere noise, but dialogue. They conversed among themselves, syncing actions like branches of one vast entity. That's when I encountered Dr. Chen. Unlike Hayes's demise or Martinez's entanglement, he stood unharmed in the desecrated mound field, notebook in hand, scribbling with urgency. "Chen!" I shouted, a wave of relief washing over me. "God, I figured you were gone." He raised his head, revealing eyes of pure black. Not mere enlargement of pupils, but an endless void, like peering into midnight depths. "Not dead," he replied, his tone laced with echoes resembling gusts through foliage. "Awakened." The spirits revealed this site's reality. He displayed the notebook, its sheets filled with symbols akin to the tree's designs, Cherokee script intertwined with apparent equations. "They've sought to warn us for years," Chen pressed on. "Each disturbance of the burial sites by people stirs more of the mountain to life. The clear-cutting back in the 1960s sparked the initial surge. Then our monitoring equipment set off the next phase. __quote_274___." He let out a chuckle, one that echoed the low vibration humming through the trunks. "No search party will make it to us anymore. The entities have shifted this part of Mount Mitchell beyond ordinary existence. Here, time flows unevenly, space twists and overlaps. We're sharing the exact instant with the Cherokee forebears interred in these earthworks." To underscore his words, shadowy silhouettes glided amid the withered trees, ethereal shapes clad in ancient Cherokee attire, their gazes brimming with ages-old resentment. They weren't mere specters. Rather, they were echoes made tangible by the roused woodland. The Fraser firs served as ideal conduits, Chen went on, his dark eyes catching glimmers from no visible source. The Adelgid devoured them gradually, gutting the vital core while preserving the outer frame. The entities poured their vitality into that void. Today, every lifeless tree across this ridge forms a piece of their collective awareness. I edged back from Chen, grasping at last that his fate transcended mere mortality. The entities hadn't merely ensnared him. They'd remade him into an altogether different being. The trees encircling the mound started shifting deliberately, not just rustling or leaning, but truly advancing. Their roots wrenched loose from the icy ground, with cracks resembling snapping limbs. They closed in a ring around me, limbs extending like twisted claws. The Cherokee laid their deceased to rest following precise ceremonies. Chen pressed on, oblivious to my mounting dread. Alignments that bound the entities to the realm of the living via the root webs of holy trees. When the timber firm raised those ties, it cut the bond between the departed and the soil. The entities have labored to mend that bond from then on. The ambulatory trees loomed near enough for me to discern the intricacies of their change. The bark didn't merely shift. It molded into shapes echoing human visages, contorted in masks of fury and sorrow. Splinters of bone fused into the timber, weaving motifs like bony claws emerging from within the stems. They seek to incorporate us among them, Chen stated, breathing people who might link their domain to ours. Martinez stepped forward willingly. Hayes resisted, so they claimed only his skeleton. I yielded completely. What do they demand of me? Chen's obsidian gaze locked onto mine, bearing a sharpness no longer wholly mortal. As a ranger, you hold sway over this territory. They desire your aid in rebuilding the graves and halting further violations. The ring of living trees constricted tighter about me. Their focus bore down on my thoughts like a crushing force. Millennia of bottled rage and mourning zeroed in on the figure embodying the authority that permitted the ruin of their holy sites. And should I decline, then you'll stand alongside Hayes as a timeless sentinel, aware yet powerless to act, forever overseeing the burial mounds till eternity's close. The trees resumed their drone, and now I deciphered their message. Not in spoken terms, but through impressions that cut straight to my psyche, unfiltered by speech. They revealed Mount Mitchell's past, cycles of Cherokee lives and deaths in this place, rituals forging bonds between the quick and the forebears, and the abrupt assault of mechanized harvesting that fractured those ties like shattered crystal. They depicted the Fraser firs in their prime, towering sentinels enduring for ages to shield the graves. They unveiled the Adelgid plague, the gradual withering of the woods, and the instant when frantic entities infused the emptied husks with their spirit to sustain the watch. And they unveiled the vision they craved, renewed sepulchres where the deceased might slumber undisturbed, guarded by a legion of watchful trees no mortal would challenge anew. The sole uncertainty lay in whether I'd assist of my own accord or end up as yet another bony vigil over their hallowed ground. The trees fell silent and paused, awaiting my reply. I had maybe half a minute before the marching trees engulfed me, their bone-laced bark features warped in timeless wrath. Chen remained still at the mound's heart, his ebony eyes mirroring celestial glow that dense overcast skies should have blocked. The Cherokee precursor entities drifted through the barren firs like mist, their see-through bodies solidifying bit by bit. "Hold on," I shouted, lifting my palms. "I require clarity on one thing before deciding." The forest seemed to hold its breath, limbs rustling without a whisper of breeze. "You're guarding those desecrated burial sites from the loggers' intrusion," I pressed on, struggling to hold my tone even. "That was 2 decades back. What's sparking your response right now?" Chen cocked his head. pondering my words. Time doesn't flow straight here any longer. The past and now blend together, though our monitoring gear for the weather served as the spark. Weather gear, he went on. We hammered steel pegs into the soil to secure our devices. Those spikes pierced right through the ancient mounds. The spirits saw it as fresh grave tampering. I recalled the routine for installing short-term weather outposts. Sturdy metal poles plunged far into the dirt for support, exactly as he'd outlined. In our ignorance, we'd violated holy resting places with our climate tools. So this is retribution for an offense we never meant to commit. The Cherokee ancestors grew even more tangible, their facial features sharpening into view. No serene faces of quiet passing, but the torment of souls whose peace had been brutally shattered. Some carried scars from illnesses, others the marks of brutal displacement. Everyone bore a sorrow so deep it echoed into the afterlife. Unknowing doesn't excuse the act, Chen stated. This range recalls each trespass, every clod of soil uprooted without leave. The ancestors endured quietly for years, but endurance wears thin. The woodland pressed onward once more, their unified intent bearing down on my thoughts like an unseen weight. They presented an option, though it scarcely qualified as one. Join them of your own accord, or end up as bare bones. Then a fragment from my studies on Cherokee lore surfaced. It's not solely the burial sites fueling your rage, I ventured. The insight struck like an icy gust. You're furious over the expulsion, the compulsion to abandon this peak when authorities seized your territory. The advance halted anew. The forebears swiveled to face me, surprise etching their features. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, I elaborated. Your kin were driven from these heights and herded toward Oklahoma. Countless perished along the Trail of Tears. The graves were merely the ultimate affront. Even your deceased couldn't remain undisturbed. Chen's dark gaze flared a fraction. Quote, 287. Quote, 288. The woodland's vibration shifted, easing from menace to curiosity. I'm a ranger, I declared, advancing against the primal urge to flee. My role is to shield this peak and all it holds. That encompasses Cherokee holy places, mapped or hidden. The forebears started murmuring among themselves in swift Cherokee, their tones rustling like parched foliage in a gale. I caught none of the language, yet the mood was contentious, some heated, others reflective. What's your offer? Chen inquired. Alliance. Aid me through this ordeal, and I'll collaborate with the Cherokee Nation to designate and safeguard those burial sites officially. No further building. No cutting timber. No weather setups or paths cutting through revered zones. And why should we rely on a government agent? Your kind has shattered every vow to ours. A valid challenge. The U.S. government's dealings with native peoples formed a legacy of deceptions and shattered accords. Quote 294 I replied. Quote 295 The trees vibrated once more, the resonance turning nearly tuneful. The ancestors formed a ring, their exchange intensifying. I noted motions and looks hinting at sharp divides on crediting my intent. Chen drew nearer, his obsidian eyes appraising me keenly. Quote, 296. Quote, 297. I confessed. Quote, 298. Quote, 299. My girls came to mind, along with the legacy I'd craft for them, the duty tied to my ranger's insignia. The ancestors arrived at an accord of sorts. The oldest among them, a woman carrying the dignified poise of a clan matriarch, came forward until she stood near enough to reach out. Her fingers went straight through my torso, and in that instant, I sensed the heavy legacy of her tribe, the deep bond they shared with this peak, the anguish of their brutal displacement, the fury at watching holy sites get ravaged. Yet there was optimism, too, a chance that the endless pattern of violation could at last be broken. She uttered just one Cherokee word before retreating to the group of apparitions. Wad Chen interpreted it as __, quote _3, 01, __. The living trees started pulling back, their bark features softening from angry grimaces into plain timber grains. The buzzing sound dwindled to a soft murmur, and the heavy pressure of their gaze eased off my back. Chen remarked, "And what of you, Martinez and Hayes?" Chen glanced over at the lifeless Fraser fir, where Dr. Martinez remained lodged in the trunk. Right then, the bark loosened its grip on her, and she collapsed onto the earth, out cold, but with steady breaths. Dr. Hayes's remains just crumbled, his skeleton dispersing as if nature had taken him naturally days earlier. "I've decided to link myself to the spirit web," Chen explained. "Somebody has to bridge the gap between realms. I'll guard the burial sites and ensure they're left untouched forever." The darkness drained from his eyes, shifting them back to their usual brown. But now I spotted a deeper insight in them, something timeless that wasn't present before. How should I report this to the Forest Service? __, quote, _306, __. Everything rings true on paper. The ancestral figures were growing sheer once more, the link between dimensions fraying. Yet prior to vanishing completely, the clan mother addressed us again. Chen relayed her words. __, quote _307, __. I transported Dr. Martinez off Mount Mitchell using a makeshift litter, my radio crackling clearly, and GPS pinpointing the right spots. The search crew linked up with us at the lot, where Martinez lay in a coma from deep hypothermia, but still holding on. The formal account noted Dr. Hayes's passing from the elements and Dr. Chen's choice to linger for advanced wintry field work. All accurate, just as Chen noted. Dr. Martinez pulled through without issues, insisting she recalled nothing of those 3 days, except nodding off in the observation post and coming to in the aid station. The Forest Service chalked up her amnesia to disorientation from the chill. She avoided Mount Mitchell after that, moving to an Arizona outpost shortly thereafter. Our instruments' logs matched Chen's forecast. Standard winter gales, devoid of eerie heat surges or freak winds. The probe wrapped up, pinning the mess on faulty tech amid brutal conditions, calling it a mix-up turned fatal. End of story. Still, I upheld my vow. After half a year of discreet digging and tactful talks, I linked up with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians and disclosed the burial spot's whereabouts. No chance I'd mention the ghosts or mobile woodlands. They'd peg it as high-elevation delusions. I framed it instead as a standard dig revealing overlooked tombs. The Cherokee Nation teamed with the Forest Service to designate the whole crest as a heritage safeguard area. No building, no cutting, no outposts. The paperwork invoked delicate archaeological spots, needing safeguards via the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. I earned a bump to lead ranger in charge of the Cultural Preservation Initiative. Tom Crawford saw it as fitting praise for my commitment to the Ridge, following a co-worker's loss. He didn't probe my newfound grasp of Cherokee lore or my push to bring in Cherokee experts for every peak project. The Fraser fir blight kept advancing through the Blue Ridge Mountains, leaving sprawling groves of ghostly silver trunks that visitors deemed eerily stunning. Ecologists pointed to the Adelgood bugs and shifting climate. I held the real story close, silent as ever. On occasion, guiding learning groups along the base slopes of Mount Mitchell, I'd highlight the barren trees and discuss their role in the ecosystem. Even after dying, those trees still contribute to the mountain's well-being. That's what I'd say to groups of kids on those tours. They safeguard the hallowed spots and hold on to memories that must never fade. The young ones would bob their heads in quiet agreement, missing the profound reality behind my statement. Hikers would sometimes catch sight of Dr. Chen near the peak, bundled up against the cold, giving a distant wave without coming closer. If anyone inquired, I'd mention he was immersed in ongoing climate studies and valued his solitude. The Forest Service figured he had some obscure permit that didn't fall under their purview. I made one trip up to see him, climbing to the burial site on the anniversary of our initial meeting. He appeared unchanged from the moment I'd abandoned him there. No signs of the harsh mountain elements over the past year. The Cherokee entities had vanished from view, yet I sensed them through the eerie sway of lifeless trees in still air. Any second thoughts? I wondered aloud. Chen's face lit up with a grin, and briefly his gaze revealed that timeless wisdom once more. Not a one. This is my true home these days. The spirits require a bridge between realms, the rational and the revered. Plus, these burial grounds are secure now, more so than at any point in the last 100 years. The mountain tends to its own affairs. I departed and descended the trail, realizing our paths might not cross again. Still, I felt confident the place was under reliable stewardship, whether from living branches or ethereal presences. My girls have reached 16, and they view their dad as fixated on preserving the peaks. Can't argue with that. For 8 years, I've labored to shield every inch of Mount Mitchell from encroachment, to designate and maintain all Cherokee holy areas, and to ensure no monitoring gear or footpath encroaches on what demands peace. Emma dreams of following in my footsteps as a ranger. Lucy leans toward digging into the past through archaeology. Raised on tales of honoring the earth and grasping its past, they've absorbed those lessons. The complete story of my Mount Mitchell ordeal remains hidden from them, but they grasp that certain locales hold sanctity that defies mere empirical explanation. In official Forest Service logs, the weather station mishap prompted better safety measures and sessions on cultural awareness. Absent from those pages, Mount Mitchell's exclusion from any new construction candidates. I discreetly tuck away every suggestion that lands before me, citing ecological risks or heritage safeguards. Certain areas rely on statutes and rules for defense. Others draw from powers beyond mortal grasp. Mount Mitchell benefits from the full spectrum, yet the Fraser Fir decline keeps advancing, leaving me to ponder if neighboring peaks are stirring their defenders. Accounts from the Great Smoky Mountains describe wanderers losing their bearings amid vast swaths of perished timber. Odd noises echo through Virginia's woodlands. In West Virginia, gear malfunctions plague excavation zones, where miners pushed boundaries too hard. Perhaps the Mount Mitchell entities mark the start of something larger. Just last month, a Colorado Ranger's letter arrived, seeking guidance on probing disappearances in beetle-ravaged zones. It detailed bizarre audio disturbances and navigation glitches that echoed my own trials. I replied with measured suggestions: honor native heritage spots and seek tribal input prior to ventures in delicate terrain. I added my contact info and a personal message. Should you face enigmas beyond routine procedures, reach out right away. Mount Mitchell taught me truths vital for all rangers. The terrain holds every memory. Some regions will rise up if provoked excessively. We're not only tasked with safeguarding folks against the wild, at times it's about shielding the wild from us. The forests retain their recollections, the essences persist, and certain vows forge a lifelong commitment surpassing formal roles. I'm Samuel Ironside, guarding Mount Mitchell these past 8 years. If this reaches you, I've met my end, and the duty shifts onward. Honor your word, cherish the holy grounds, and bear in mind, barren trunks can stir to life when called upon. The mountain depends on it.